Hi everyone, welcome to Culture Quantum. I understand that now you are in the phase where your preparation is entering into a very exhausting phase, and so as so many thought processes must be going on with you. At this point of time, even a little bit of predictions, even a little bit of help from the experts that what is most important becomes very handy. So, just like last year, we came up with the videos related to the probable topics in the entire history portion, and it covered the portions from ancient history, medieval history, and art and culture, and so as modern Indian history. Some of the questions were directly from those videos, and it gives me a little bit of pride and happiness that I was a bit helpful to you. So, continuing with this endeavor, this year also I'm starting with the probable topics of the entire history portion and so as the art and culture. So, now I'm starting with the ancient and medieval history, the probable topics, and these predictions are based on the PYQs. So, as I'm calling right now these predictions as FYQs, which means future year questions, and it is a meticulously and so as curated list after looking at the various exams conducted by UPSC and so as the trend of the UPSC Prelims examination. So let's start with some of the topics, and I'm starting with ancient history. So, the very first thing in the ancient history I would like to say to you, Gupta period is one very important phase in the Indian history, and so as it is a very important theme in the ancient history questions of the prelims examination. So, though I know that you have done many classes in the coaching institutions and you must have studied NCRTs and many other things, but Gupta period you must revise. I'll just give you a little bit of probable topic from the Gupta that they have asked about the ports, they have asked about many administrative stuff. Now, the titles could be one thing which can be asked from the Gupta period. So, Gupta rulers took the titles like Maharaja Dhiraj, Param Bhattarak, and Parameshwar. So, once again, I'm repeating that Gupta rulers took the titles like Maharaja Dhiraj, Parameshwara, and Param Bhattarak. Apart from it, they have also taken title like Param Dvait and Param Bhagavat. So Param Dvait and Param Bhagavat titles are the ones with which Gupta rulers tried to associate their names with the gods like God Vishnu, like God Kartikeya, and many other gods from the Hindu pantheon. So remember that titles could be one thing that can be asked from the Gupta period. Now moving further, the one very important running theme in the prelims examination is the timeline thing. So very often you are asked to arrange the dynasties according to the timeline. And also regional dynasties in the recent past has been more important in the prelims examination, and sometimes these are the difficult parts of the prelims paper. So let's see some of the regional dynasty in the post Gupta period from North India also and so as the South India also. So I'm starting with the very first dynasty, that is Maitrakas. Maitrakas ruled in the area of Saurashtra in Gujarat in between 475 to 776 AD. Senapati Bhattarak was the founder of this dynasty and they ruled from the city of Vallabhi, which was their capital. Apart from it, Dhruvasen I was one of the very important initial ruler, and Dhruvasen I was the king at the time of the first Jain council, which was held at Vallabhi in 512 AD. Then comes the next important ruler of this dynasty, whose name was Dhruvasen II. And Dhruvasen II was married to the daughter of Harshvardhan, which means that he was contemporary of Harshvardhan and he has matrimonial relationship with the Pushyabhuti dynasty of Thaneshwar, ruled by Harshvardhan. Huensang in his book Siyuki has mentioned that Dhruvasen II attended the Prayag assembly convened by Harshvardhan. Another very important ruling dynasty in the post-Gupta period was Mokharis of the Kannauj. Mokharis of the Kannauj Kannauj, their origin is traced back to 510 AD and they were short-lived dynasty. By 606, this dynasty was completely decimated and it became the part of the Pushyabhuti dynasty of the Thanishwar. So, first of all, Harivarman Mokhari was the founder of this dynasty. And obviously, in 100 years, there were many rulers, but the last ruler of this dynasty was Grahavarman, and he was important in many sense. He was a powerful ruler and he exercised good power in the area of Kannauj. Kannauj was one of the most important industrial city of that time. Often you must have heard about Kannauj's relation with the Itra. So it was the city of the perfumes from the long time. But at this time also, it was a very important industrial city. So Grahavarman got married to Rajyashri, who was the daughter of the Pushyabhuti ruler Prabhakar Vardhan. And it was all good between the two dynasties, Mokharis of Kannauj and Pushyabhutis of Thanishwar. But both of them had a common enemy, and that common enemy was Shashank God of Bengal. And in one such fight, Shashank God killed Grahavarman, and he also killed the ruler of the Pushyabhuti Rajyavardhan. And in this situation, the rise of new ruler has happened in the history of the ancient India, that is Harshvardhan. Harshvardhan was able to free his sister Rajyashri from the captivity of the Shashank god, and he was also able to free the city of Kannauj, and he was also the person who shifted the capital of Pushyabhuti dynasty from Thanishwar to Kannauj. After the decline of the Guptas, another dynasty with the name of the Guptas, that is later Guptas, emerged in the Magad. Remember that Guptas and later Guptas were not associated with each other, but maybe the Magad rulers, the later Guptas, they continued with the Gupta name to establish some sort of connection with the Guptas of the Prayag and Ujjain. So moving forward, this dynasty ruled from 490 to 750 AD and their capital was Patliputra. So it's not the Magad like the Magad of the past. It's a much weaker Magad. Krishna Gupta was the founder of this dynasty, and the historical records say that his daughter was married to Aditya Varman, who was the Mokhari ruler of Kannauj. Jivit Gupta is considered to be the last ruler of this dynasty. Otherwise, there are lesser known things about this dynasty. Previously in Mokhari episode, I was talking about the Gaudas of Bengal. Gaudas were the devoted Hindus of the Bengal, and Shashank God was the most important ruler of this dynasty. As far as tenure of this dynasty is concerned, it ran from 554 to 636 AD. Hardly 80 years, closer to 80 years they have ruled, but these years were very formidable and they posed challenges to many other dynasties. So as previously I mentioned that Shashank God was the one who killed Grahavarman Mokhari, and so as he also killed Pushyabhuti ruler Rajyavardhan, after which Harshvardhan came to power. Shashank was a formidable enemy and he could not be completely defeated until his death in 636. Shashank God was also very much anti to the Buddhist faith of that time, and Shashank God was responsible for cutting the sacred Bodhi tree under which Buddha got enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. The old name Bodh Gaya was Uruvela. Another very important dynasty from the eastern India after the post-Gupta period is the Eastern Ganga dynasty of eastern India. Eastern Ganga dynasty was a very powerful dynasty. But as far as their history is concerned, their history has three phases. So the first phase is basically the classical period, which started from 493 AD and it continued till 1077 AD. So that was the Eastern Ganga classical period and they ruled from Kalinga. After that, the second phase of the Eastern Ganga dynasty started from 1077 AD, continued till 1436 AD. And in this phase, Eastern Ganga dynasty ruled from Trikalinga. The last phase of this dynasty was from 1436 till 1947. And the last branch of the Eastern Ganga dynasty ruled from Khemundi, That's why they are called as Khemundi Ganga dynasty also. So 3 phases: classical, and second phase is called as imperial, and third phase is called as Khemundi. Now, as far as the Eastern Ganga dynasty is concerned, they ruled entire modern day Odisha at that time. And in fact, it also included the areas from Chhattisgarh and modern day Andhra. What is the biggest contribution of the Eastern Ganga dynasty? That they created some of the highly renowned, world famous temples. The most important ones are Jagannath Temple of Puri, Sun Temple of Konark, Ananta Vasudev Temple of Bhubaneswar, Narsingadev Temple of Simhachalam. So these were the temples which they created, and a unique type of the temple architecture started to develop under their patronage. And this unique style is called as Odisha style, but it maintains a little bit of distinctiveness from the original Nagar style. For example, that the temples of the Odisha style has Deul Sikhara, which is almost vertical from the base, but all of a sudden, closer to the top, it starts curving. Another very important feature of the Odisha temple that they may have boundary walls, and the outer walls of the temples are lavishly decorated, but they keep the interior walls completely plain. Another important post-Gupta period dynasty from the central and so as eastern and so as southern India was the Kalachuri dynasty. Why I have taken the 3 areas name? Because there were 3 branches of the Kalachuris. The first branch was the Kalachuris of Mahismati, who ruled from 550 till 625. Though only 75 years, but they were very strong in the areas of Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and also some parts of the Andhra. As far as the Mahishmati branch of Kalachuri is concerned, they were the earliest patrons of the caves which were created in the Ellora and the caves which were associated with the Hinduism. So in nutshell, Kalachuris of Mahishmati were earliest patrons of some of the Hindu caves of Ellora. The next branch of the Kalachuris was the Kalachuri rulers of Tripuri, and they ruled from 675 till 1212 from the areas of today's Madhya Pradesh, and particularly Tripuri is the area of the Jabalpur. So they ruled from the area of the Tripuri. Then the third branch of the Kalachuri is the Kalachuris of the Kalyani. So Kalyani is northern Karnataka. So founder of the third branch was Bijjala II, who usurped power from the Chalukya dynasty of Karnataka. And their rule was also not for very long period, but they ruled for somewhere around 200 years in the 12th century AD. When Gupta Empire was emerging in North India, another formation was happening in southern India after the decline of the Satavahanas. Satavahanas were replaced by Ikshvakus. Ikshvaku dynasty has a historical importance, religious, cultural importance, because it is believed that Lord Ram belonged to the Ikshvaku clan. As far as the historical things of the Ikshvakus are concerned, initially they were feudatories of the Satavahanas, and when they were feudatories of Satvahana, that time they ruled from Dharanikota. Dharanikota is the old name of Amravati. In some documents, Dharanikota is also mentioned as Dhanyakatak. But later, when they have replaced Satvahanas and they have become ruler, so they started to rule from Nagarjunakonda. There is another name of Nagarjunakonda which is mentioned in many of the historical texts, that is Sri Parvatiya. So Sri Parvatiya is another name of Nagarjunakonda, and as such, Ikshvakus at many places are mentioned as Sri Parvatiya Ikshvaku. As far as this name is concerned, it is also indicative of that Ikshvakus were devotees of the Lord Shiva. Saivite faith was very popular in the Ikshvakus. Vasishthiputra Chamatmula was the founder of this dynasty, and the most important ruler of this dynasty was Mathari Putra Veerapurush Dutt. You can find one resemblance in both the names, that both the names are carrying the names of mother. It's a tradition which is continuing from the Satvahan period, and in Satvahan period also you must have noticed the names like Gautami Putra Satkarni, Vasishthiputra Pulamai. So, matrilineal tradition of the Satavahanas continued in the Ikshvaku's clan also. As far as the religious beliefs of the Ikshvakus are concerned, as I said, that they were following the Saivite faith, but at the same point of time, Lord Kartikeya was also very popular. For example, Veerapurshdatta was devotee of Lord Kartikeya, who is also known as Murugan Swami, Kukke Subramanya Swami, and also known as Mayo. So he was devotee of Lord Kartikeya. But one very important aspect of the Ikshvakus, that their allegiance was not just associated with Hinduism. In fact, it was quite open allegiance. And one a very interesting fact about the Ikshvakus, that on one hand, the rulers, the males, they seem to be the devotees of the Hindu pantheon. On the other hand, the queens of the kingdom, they were quite much associated with the Buddhism. In fact, due to the contribution of the queens of the Ikshvaku, many stupas, monasteries and Buddhist monuments were created in the Nagarjunakonda, Dharanikota, Dhanyakatak. And moreover, it is due to their contribution, due to their patronage, Amravati School of Art flourished. Karnataka was always the land of many dynasties from the ancient times, and one of the very important dynasty in the Karnataka was the Kadamba dynasty. So Kadambas ruled in Karnataka from 340 AD to 545 AD, near about 200 years. Mayur Sharma was the founder of this dynasty, but the most important ruler of this dynasty was Kakusthavarma. Initially, the capital of the Kadamba was Banavasi, which is Uttar Kannada district of the modern times, and later it is the Kakusthavarma who shifted the capital from Banavasi to the present-day Kolar, which is in the outskirts of the Bangalore. As far as the achievements of the Kakusthavarma is concerned, he is the one who was responsible for territorial expansion of Kadamba dynasty. Apart from it, he is also remembered for constructing many temples related to Hindus, and so as many premises associated with the Jainas. So for example, he created Kolaramma temple, Kedareshwar temple, and many of the basadis of the Jainas at Shravanabelagola and Halebedu. Another very important fact about Kakusthavarma's tenure is his court poet Durvinita, who was equally competent in Sanskrit and Kannada. And Durvinita wrote Kakusthavarma Charite, which is basically the biography of the Kakusthavarma. Apart from it, it is believed that the earliest Kannada writings started to emerge from the Kadamba dynasty period time onwards, and they were the one who were patronizing Kannada literature and the Kannada language. Next important dynasty of Karnataka is the Western Ganga dynasty. You must not be confused that Western Ganga and Eastern Ganga were associated. Names are similar, but Western Ganga is completely different from the Eastern Ganga dynasty of Odisha. So let's start the history of the Western Ganga. They ruled from 350 AD to 1000 AD. As far as this dynasty is concerned, it was a very prominent dynasty which ruled the today's southern Karnataka, parts of Tamil Nadu and parts of Kerala also. As far as the foundation of this dynasty is concerned, Kongani Varman Madhava was the founder of this dynasty, and they ruled from the area of the Kolar. Kolar, which was capital of the previous dynasty which I mentioned, Kadambas. It was also the capital of the Western Ganga dynasty. But in the later times, Western Ganga rulers shifted their capital to Talakad. Talakad is on the banks of river Kaveri. As far as the contribution of the Western Ganga dynasty is concerned, their most important contribution was the promotion of the Hinduism and Jainism. And moreover, not only they promoted these two religions, but also they promoted the structures related to, institutional structures related to these two religions, so as the promotion of the Sanskrit language and Kannada language. One of the earliest prose of the Kannada language is Chavundaraya Purana, which was written in 970s by Chavundaraya. So Kannada has taken a very big leap during the tenure of the Western Ganga dynasty. Kalabharas were one very important dynasty from the southern India, particularly the area of Tamil Nadu. Their rule was somewhere in between 3rd century AD to 6th century AD. And very often they are considered as a very mysterious dynasty because they disrupted the Sangam age developments and they were not at all having any kind of allegiance to the Tamilkam culture and Tamilkam literature. So when we look at the coins of the Kalabharas, their coins were bearing the language Prakrit. So symbols and everything was resembling in the manner of the language Prakrit. Apart from it, Kalabharas, they were known for patronizing Buddhism and Jainism, but they were not known for the patronizing the developments of the Sangam age of that time. And many a times Kalabhara's duration is considered to be dark ages in the history of the Tamil area. Then what about how their rule came to an end? So it is believed that in the 6th century AD, Simha Vishnu of the Pallava dynasty completely defeated Kalabharas and restored the Tamilkam pride. I know that regional dynasties and names of dynasties, their tenure, everything is not easy to absorb. So for your convenience, my handwritten notes I would be uploading on my Telegram channel, that is t.me culture quantum. Be associated with it and you can download all these notes of these lectures from the Telegram channel. When you look at the trend of the UPSC Prelims paper and particularly from the ancient and medieval ages, you will find that there is a theme which is popular in the question paper, that is land grants, different names of the land grants. The land grant history is concerned, Satavahanas were the first ruler who started the practice of granting the land. So if at all, if you get a question that land grant started from the period before Satavahanas, so automatically it is wrong. Satavahanas started the practice of the land grant, but it became a very broader practice at the time of the Guptas. And during the tenure of the Guptas, land grants were not only given to the priest or the priestly class, but it was also given to the officials and the people who were working in the kingdom. So let's talk about those land grants which were popular at the time of the Guptas and also after the post-Gupta period. The very first category of the land grant is called as Nividharmas. So they were permanent land endowments, meaning it has been permanently given to a person and whatever he wants to do, he can do with that. Then the second one is referred as Nividharma Akshayana. So Nividharma Akshayana is also a permanent land endowment and there is a specific condition which is mentioned that the person who has got Nividharma Akshayana cannot be alienated from it and indefinitely he can reap the benefits of the Nividharma Akshayana. The third category of the land grant was Aprada Dharma. Once again, the third category of the land grant during Gupta period was Aprada Dharma, and though it is also a land grant which is given to a person who can take all the benefits of it, but there is a condition that he cannot make subsequent gift of this land grant. It means that the person can enjoy the benefits of the land, but he cannot give it to anybody else. Then comes the fourth category of the land grant, which is called as Bhumicha Chhidra Nyaya. Bhumicha Chhidra Nyaya is a category of the land which is barren. And if a person who has turned barren land into a cultivable land, so this land grant is given to the person. And moreover, these land grants were exempt from paying any kind of rent or taxes to the government. So these were the official category land grants. But the land grants which were given to the Brahmins and the priestly class, they were called as Brahmadeya. So if the group of Brahmins are given land grant for their service, these lands were called as Brahmadeya. The next land grant given to the Brahmin society was Agrahara or Mangalam. These were often entire village given to the Brahmin people, and these villages were tax exempt villages. The third category is the Devadan land grant. Devadan land grant was given to the temple endowments or temple institutions. It was meant for the maintenance of the deity, and this land grant was given to the temple authorities who could be Brahmins also and who could be non-Brahmins also. In the post-Gupta period in the area of Odisha, Karasausasan was one of the land grant. And this land grant, though it is given to the people, but it was not exempted from paying the taxes. So basically, the grantee was responsible for paying some portion of the revenue which is generated from this land grant, which is called as Karasasan. During the Sangam age, particularly when the early Chola rulers were there and once they were replaced by the Pallavas, so in both the dynasties, there was a special category of the land grant which was called as Iripatti. So Iripatti was a land grant which was meant for the revenue which is generated from this land to maintain the irrigation tanks, and irrigation tanks in those areas were called as Iri. So Iripatti is a land grant meant for maintenance of the irrigation tanks during the tenure of the early Cholas and the Pallavas. Moving further, the mainline Chola dynasty or the imperial Chola dynasty were also responsible for many of the land grants. And in fact, there was a categorization classification in the land grants of the mainline Chola dynasty, just like the Guptas. So the very first land grant of the mainline Chola dynasty is the Sallabhog. Sallabhog land grant was meant for maintenance of the schools and it was meant for the education. Then comes Palicha Chandam. Palicha Chandam was another land grant, and this land grant was given to the Jain institutions known as Pallis. Pallis means Jain temples, Jain monasteries or Jain basadis. Another very important land grant during the mainline Chola dynasty period is Tirunamattakkanni. Tirunamattakkanni was given to the temples and it was meant for the maintenance of the deity. Apart from it, Velan Vagai was a category of the land which was owned by the non-Brahmin peasant proprietors of the Chola period. So, what does it indicate? That during the Chola period, particularly this imperial Chola period, there were the peasant proprietors who were non-Brahmins also. Another very important theme in the prelims examination, particularly when it comes to the ancient India, so measurement units are often asked in exam. So let's start with the measurement units which were used during the Vedic period, and particularly the length measurements. So the very first is called as Angula. Angula is the width of the finger. Then comes, after the Angula, is the Hasta. Hasta is the measurement starting from the elbow until the tip of the middle finger. So it is approximately 45 centimeter. Then comes the Dhanush. So Dhanush is basically the length of a dhanush, that is bow, and it comes around 1.9 meter. And then another very important unit at this time was yojan. So yojan was for the larger distances, which means 12 to 15 kilometer. As far as the weight units of the Vedic period is concerned, Rati was the smallest unit, and Rati is basically weight of a gunja seed, which comes around 0.11 gram. After the Rati is the Karsh. Karsh is basically made from 16 Ratis. So you can do the multiplication and arrive at what is the exact gram weightage of the Karsh. The time unit measurement of the Vedic period, most important was Muhurat, and Muhurat is 48 minutes. And then comes the Ghati and Nadi, both of them are 24-minute duration. So let's talk about the measurement units of the classical period. Which period is called as classical? So basically starting from the Mauryas till the Guptas is the classical period. As far as the length unit of the classical period is concerned, they continued with the Angula and Hasta. But apart from it, they also came up with two more units. The unit is Danda, which is approximately closer to 3 meter, and Krosh, which is approximately equivalent to 3.2 kilometers. Then come to weight and volume units. They continued with the concept of the Rati. Then comes the Suvarna, which is closer to 11 grams. Suvarna was followed by Tola. Very often we use the word Tola in purchase of the gold. So Tola is 11.6 grams, and then comes Drone. Drone was used for measuring the volume, and it is approximately closer to equivalent to 200 liters. In the classical age, Nivartana was the land measurement. And what was Nivartana? In a particular day, a pair of oxen, how much land they can plow is the Nivartana, and it comes around 0.67 acre. Apart from it, Kshetra at this point of time was called as agricultural land. And some of the popular land measurement units at this time were Kulyavap, Dronavap, Adhavap. So Kulyavap was the largest unit. Then comes the Dronavap, and Adhavap was closer to half acres of land. Coins are also one of the very important themes in prelims exam. And very often these are the most difficult questions of the prelims exam. So I'll not give you an entire list of the coins. I have just curated only 2 coins. The very first one is Aurei. Aurei, Aurei. Aurei was the standard Roman gold coin which was used in the Indo-Roman trade in between 1st century BC till 4th century AD. So it covers the period of the Guptas also. The second important coin, as my perspective is concerned, for this year paper is Kopeki. Kopeki was also the gold coin which was mentioned by the famous traveler to Vijayanagar, Abdul Razak of Samarkand. And this Kopeki was equivalent to half a Varaha. Varaha was the gold coin of the Vijayanagar kingdom, and Varaha was also called as pagoda. In the coin aspect, remember this too, that is Kopeki, mentioned by Abdul Razak, and Aurei, which was the standard gold coin of the Indo-Roman trade in between 1st century BC to 4th century AD. Recently, Bower manuscript was in the news. From where it has been found? Bower manuscript has been found from a place called Kucha in Xinjiang province of China. And it was found in a Buddhist Mahavir. So what is so special about the Bower manuscript? Actually, it is one of the oldest surviving manuscript which talks about the Indian system of the Ayurveda or Indian medicinal system, Ayurveda. Vular Lake of Kashmir, which is historically known as Mahapadma Lake, was also recently in the news. And as far as this lake is concerned, it is fed by the Jhelum river. And moreover, this Mahapadma lake, there was one ruler of the Utpala dynasty of the Kashmir whose name was Avanti Varman. He took measures to stop the flooding from the Vular lake or Mahapadma lake into agricultural areas. His engineer, whose name was Suya, he dredged the river bed of the Jhelum river, and so as this lake. And after dredging, embankment was done on this particular Mahapadma lake, and he permanently solved the problem of flooding in this area. There are many historical personalities which are quite popular, and in the recent news, the very popular Queen of India was Rani Durgavati of Gadkatanga. Rani Durgavati was the daughter of Kirat Rai, the Chandel ruler of the Bundelkhand. In 1542, she was married to Dalpat Shah. After the death of her husband, Dalpat Shah, in 1550, she took the reins of Gadkatanga and she started to rule the area as a regent of her son Bir Narayan. It was the Rani Durgavati of Gadkatanga who defeated Baj Bahadur of Malwa, and she was very successful in the Malwa campaign. In 1564, Akbar initiated a campaign against Rani Durgavati, and he entrusted the task of fighting with Rani Durgavati with his trusted general Asaf Khan. Though in the initial phase Rani Durgavati was able to defeat Asaf Khan, but in the later part of the fight, Akbar was successful and Rani Durgavati sacrificed her life defending Gadkatanga. So let's start with the most important topics of ancient and medieval. As far as ancient and medieval is concerned, one of the area which is often asked in exam about many of the regional dynasties, and today Culture Quantum is going to pick up the topic of regional dynasties in between 200 AD to 8th century AD, and basically those dynasties which are in the Gupta age and so as in the post-Gupta age. So let's start. One very important regional kingdom who were the contemporaries of the Gupta are the Vakatakas of Deccan. who mostly ruled from Maharashtra and parts of Madhya Pradesh and also touching the parts of Andhra, Telangana, so as Chhattisgarh. So Vakataka dynasty was founded by Vindhya Sakti somewhere around 250 AD. It is exactly the same timeline when Sri Gupta has founded Gupta dynasty. After the first ruler Vindhya Sakti, the most important ruler was his son only, whose name was Pravar. And actual expansion of that territory has happened under Pravar. But after the end of tenure of the Pravar, Vakataka kingdom got divided into two branches, which is Pravarpura Nandi Vardhana branch, basically based in area of Nagpur and Wardha, and then the branch of Vats Gulma, which is basically the area of Wasim in modern Maharashtra. As far as the first branch, that is Pravarpura Nandi Vardhana is concerned, one of its ruler was Rudrasen II, and Rudrasen II was married to daughter of Chandragupta II Prabhavati Gupta. Around 385 AD, death of Rudrasen II happened in an unfortunate way, but it led to Prabhavati Gupta becoming the de facto ruler of Vakataka kingdom of the first branch under the guidance of her father Chandragupta II. Prabhavati was blessed with two sons, and these two sons were Divakar Sen and Damodar Sen. But it is the Divakar Sen who is also known as Pravar Sen II, and he is regarded as one of the most important ruler of the Vakataka dynasty. So let me tell you one unique fact about the Pravar Sen II. Unique fact is that most of the inscription in India, they are belonging to Ashoka, but the second most number of the inscription belong to Pravar Sen II. Another branch of Vakatakas was Vatsgulma branch, as I said earlier. So the ruler of the Vatsgulma branch, Harisen, he is the one who annexed the first branch and amalgamated the two branches in 480 AD. And then this dynasty continued somewhere till 550 AD, which is exactly similar to the end of the Guptas also. As far as the contribution of the Vatsgulma branch is concerned, this is the branch which patronized Ajanta and Ellora caves. Many of the premises were patronized by either the rulers of the Vatsgulma branch or their ministers. And as you know, that these two sites are one of the UNESCO Heritage Site and famous for their beauty and their aesthetic. Coming to another very important dynasty during the Gupta's rule, that is Abhiras. Abhiras, their origin is considered to be somewhere around 203 AD, but their exact beginning is said to be from the 315 to 370 AD. And Ishwar Sen is believed to be the initial ruler of this dynasty. As far as the area of this dynasty is concerned, they ruled vast area in Maharashtra, and so as the parts of the Gujarat, so as the parts of Madhya Pradesh. In nutshell, it can be said that they ruled the Konkan part or the coastal part of Western Ghats. One important fact about the Abhira dynasty is that their history is shrouded in much of obscurity and not many details are available about it. But there is one detail which is mentioned in the famous Allahabad inscription or Prayagraj inscription of Samudragupta. Samudragupta mentions that he defeated Abhiras, and moreover he also mentions Abhiras as the frontier coastal kingdom of India, and he also mentions that after the defeat they were paying him taxes. As far as the end of this dynasty is concerned, they lost some part of their kingdom to Kadambas and Vakatakas, but they were completely replaced by Traikutakas. They were also one of the frontier dynasty. So let's talk about who were Traikutakas. Traikutaka dynasty ruled Nadan Konkan in between 388 to 550 AD. Indradutt was the initial ruler of this dynasty and he is the founder. As far as this Traikutaka name is concerned, Kalidas in his momentous work, Raghuvansam, he has mentioned Trikuta Parvat. So they trace their name from the Trikuta Parvat, which is three-peaked mountain, and this three-peaked mountain is present in the Konkan area. Moving ahead, Dhar Sen was the most important ruler of this dynasty who has expanded this kingdom. But as far as the decline of this kingdom is concerned, it was annexed by the Vishnukundin ruler Madhav Varma II. Traikutaka dynasty ruled in between 388 AD to 550 AD. The next not so very well known regional dynasty during the Gupta rule was Salankayana. Salankayanas ruled in between 300 to 440 AD, and they basically ruled between area of Godavari and the Krishna river. In fact, it is the Salankayanas who have been mentioned in Geography of Ptolemy, which was written around 140 AD, and it is the Ptolemy who has mentioned that Salankayanas were the inhabitants of the region between Godavari and Krishna river. Moreover, not many records are available about the Salankayanas, but the most important and the first ruler was Hastivarman, and Hastivarman was defeated by Samudragupta. So, once again, it is the Samudragupta's Allahabad pillar inscription or Prayagraj pillar inscription which mentions that he defeated Hastivarman of Salankayana, and moreover, Salankayana ruler Hastivarman agreed to pay the taxes to Samudragupta. Another thing which is important about the Salankayana dynasty, that it is a Brahmin dynasty which traces its name from a Brahmin sage whose name was Salankayan. Another very important regional dynasty at the time of the Guptas is Vishnukundins, who ruled in the tri-junction area of the Andhra, Telangana and Odisha. They ruled in between 420 to 624. As far as the initial founder is concerned, Madhav Varma first was the initial founder. Madhav Varma first has some sort of confrontation with the Vakataka rulers, but in the end it resulted into matrimonial alliance between the two kingdoms. Moving on to the next information about the Vishnukundins is that Vishnukundins were defeated by the Chalukya ruler Pulakesin II in 616 AD. But later on, it is the brother of the Pulakesin II whose name is Vishnuvardhan who defeated Vishnukundins completely, and then he annexed their capital Vengi, and that's how the emergence of the eastern branch of the Chalukyas has happened at this time, which ruled from the area of the Vengi. So the reality is that Vengi was the initial capital of Vishnukundin. Another very important dynasty is Saravpuriya dynasty, which ruled in between 5th to 6th century AD. They were initially vassals of Gupta or feudatories of the Gupta, but after the decline of the Guptas in 5th and 6th century AD, they became independent rulers of Odisha and Chhattisgarh area. Sripura was the capital of dynasty, and moreover, Sarabha was the first ruler of this dynasty. By faith, they were the devotee of the Lord Vishnu. Vaishnavite tradition was very popular in Sarapuriya dynasty, and moreover, they were worshippers of the Krishna Vasudev. They created many premises dedicated to the Krishna Vasudev. Another very important dynasty in the post-Gupta age was the Nala dynasty, which ruled in between Chhattisgarh and Odisha, and basically their core area was the Bastar and Koraput district of the Odisha. Bhavat Varman or Bhavadat Varman was the initial ruler of this dynasty, who is remembered from his Rithapur copper inscription. In this inscription, an interesting fact is mentioned that he and his queen, they visited to Prayag for Sangam participation, or basically it is all about the participation in the Kumbh. Moreover, Skanda Varman was the last ruler of this dynasty. This dynasty right from the beginning had confrontation with the Vakatakas, which is believed to be the reason of their decline. Another popular dynasty from the post-Gupta age are the Pandu Vamsis of Mekhala and Pandu Vamsis of Dakshin Kosala. So let's talk about the Pandu Vamsis of Mekhala. They derived their name from the Maikal hill range, and they basically ruled in the area in between Amarkantak hills and the Maikal hills. It is a lunar dynasty which traces its origin from the legendary Pandavas of Mahabharata. As far as the foundation of this dynasty is concerned, Jayabala was the initial founder of this dynasty. And the Mekhala branch ruled in between 6th century to 7th century AD. Then comes the second branch of the Pandu Vamsis, that is Dakshin Kosala. It is basically the Shipur area of Chhattisgarh state. And Pandu Vamsis of the Kosalas, they also, since they are associated with Mekhala, they also trace their origin from Pandavas, and their most important ruler was Indrabala. Pandu Vamsis were perhaps, they were feudatories of the Guptas and Vakatakas, and by the 8th century AD, they lost their kingdom to newly emerging equations in the eastern part of India. Another dynasty which I want to mention is the Bhoj dynasty of Goa. You must have heard about the Bhoj rulers of Madhya Pradesh or Bhoj rulers of Rajasthan, but Bhoj rulers of Goa were also equally famous.
And it is believed that they ruled in between 3rd century AD to 6th century AD. Moreover, they are believed to be the branch of Hoysaleshwara Dynasty, which traces its lineage from the Yaduvanshis of the Mathura. Devraj was the initial ruler of this dynasty, and Chandor in the modern Goa was their capital. One of the very popular and very famous area of ancient India is Kalinga. Kalinga is basically the coastal area between Godavari and Mahanadi river. And this area became famous under the Chedi Mahajanpad and the ruler of the Chedi Empire, Kharvela. But after the disintegration of the Kharvela Empire, many small dynasties emerged in Kalinga area. And some of the important dynasties of this area are the Matharas, Pitri Bhaktas. So let's talk about them. One of the initial important dynasty which emerged from the disintegration of the Chedi dynasty were the Matharas. And Matharas basically ruled between the Ganjam district of Odisha and Srikakulam of Andhra Pradesh. Shakti Varman was the first ruler of this dynasty, and they followed Vaishnavite faith. For the first time, it is Shakti Varman who took the title of Kalingadhipati, which means he was the lord of the Kalinga. But this dynasty was overthrown from area of Odisha and Andhra by the Pitri Bhakta dynasty. So let's talk about the next dynasty, which is Pitri Bhaktas. Pitri Bhakta dynasty ruled in between 5th and 6th century AD in the areas of southern Odisha and parts of Andhra. Uma Varman was the first ruler of this dynasty, and he defeated Mathara king Ananta Sakti Varman. Moreover, he also took the title of Kalingadhipati, which means Lord of the Kalinga. Moreover, this dynasty met his final fate by defeat from Eastern Ganga dynasty. So to know about Eastern Ganga dynasty, you must see last year videos of Culture Quantum on most important topics of ancient and medieval. So with these all topics, please cover those topics also. So finally, let's talk about one last dynasty. As far as the regional kingdoms in post-Gupta and Gupta period are concerned, is the Vasishtha dynasty, which ruled in 5th century AD in the area of, once again, Odisha and Chhattisgarh and Andhra. And they were more concentrated in the Vijayanagaram district of Andhra. Guna Varman was the initial ruler of this dynasty, and Ananta Varman was the last ruler. They traced their lineage to the Vasishtha Gotra. And moreover, this dynasty was the follower of Lord Shiva. They were not the followers of Vishnu, which was practiced in the Mathara dynasty. So today you learnt about important regional dynasties during the Gupta age and post-Gupta age.
In this episode of the Culture Quantum, we are going to cover the regional dynasties of India from the ancient and medieval India, which are very important from the exam perspective, and their timeline and their important contribution has often been asked in not only UPSC Prelims examination, but all the exams conducted by UPSC and the several governmental bodies in India. So let's begin this journey. So let's start the journey with the Vakata kingdom of Maharashtra, which existed between 250 AD to 500 AD. And as far as the area of the Vakata kingdom is concerned, it covered the entire area of the Malwa, so as it included the areas of the Gujarat, entire Maharashtra, and it was also touching the southern borders of the Tungabhadra river. The capital of this particular kingdom was Vatsgumla, which is now the modern district of Wasim in central Maharashtra. Vindhya Sakti is believed to be the first ruler, or basically the founder of this particular dynasty. But it was the Pravar Sen first who expanded the kingdom to the frontiers which I have mentioned in this video. Vakatakas were the practitioners of Hinduism, but they also patronized and promoted Buddhism and Jainism. So some of their rulers were very closer to the Buddhist faith also. Now, another very interesting and important fact about the Vakatakas, that the rock-cut cave monuments of Ajanta, like viharas and chaityas of Ajanta, they were created due to the patronage of the Vakatak ruler Harisen. Vakatakas were contemporary of the Guptas, and in fact they shared a very good relation with the Guptas. For example, Gupta ruler Chandragupta II married his daughter Prabhavati to Rudrasen II,
And with the support of the Vakatak ruler Rudrasen II, Gupta ruler Chandragupta II was able to defeat Sak Satrapa of the Gujarat. And Sak Satrapa of the Gujarat were a constant threat to the Guptas, and in fact, in one such incident, they have kidnapped one of the Gupta ruler Ramagupta. By 500 AD, Vakatakas lost their kingdom to the Western Chalukyas, or basically the Chalukyas of Badami. But last but not the least, Vakatakas were also known for their patronage to literature. In fact, some of the Vakatak rulers, they were great composers of the Prakrit literature. For example, Pravarsen II wrote Setubandh, which was written in Maharashtri Prakrit, and Sarvasen wrote Hari Vijay, which was also written in Maharashtri Prakrit. And this particular literature, Hari Vijay, it tells the story of the Parija tree, which was brought by Lord Krishna to the planet Earth. And moreover, it is to be remembered that these Maharashtri Prakrit, which were written at this point of time, they are one of the initial progenitors of the Marathi literature. Moving on to the next important dynasty from the ancient India. It is the Kadamba dynasty, which ruled in Karnataka in between 345 AD to 540 AD. And this dynasty was founded in 345 by Mayur Sharma. It's a very interesting name, which is used in today's time also. And their capital was Banvasi. So Banvasi was also in the middle of the Karnataka. As far as this dynasty is concerned, this was the first indigenous dynasty of the Karnataka, which started using Kannada language as the language of the soil. And from here onwards, the history of the Kannada literature is starting, and further promotion of the Kannada language started. Another important fact about the Kadamba dynasty, that they were the contemporaries of the Western Ganga dynasty. And you must not confuse the Western Ganga dynasty with the Eastern Ganga dynasty, because Eastern Ganga dynasty ruled in the Kalinga, that is Odisha, and Western Ganga dynasty was in the area of the Karnataka itself. So they were contemporaries of the Western Ganga dynasty. The most important ruler of the Kadamba dynasty was the Kakustavarman, who expanded the kingdom, and because of which it was able to continue till 540 AD. Moving further to the third important dynasty from the ancient India, Western Ganga dynasty of the Karnataka. And this dynasty ruled in between 345 AD to 1000 AD. They ruled in the area of the southern Karnataka, which includes the areas like Kolar, Talakadu and Mysore. After the rise of the Western Chalukyas of the Badami, they accepted the overlordship of the Western Chalukyas in the middle of the 6th century AD. Though it was a small kingdom, but its contribution in the culture and literature was immense, and the further patronage to the Kannada literature continued at this point of time. Another very important fact about Western Ganga dynasty, that they were benevolent to all the faith, that is Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, but there was a special corner for the Jainism, and it is because of their patronage, the very important place associated with the Jainism, Shravan-Belgola, and the monuments that you see at the Shravan-Belgola was created under their patronage. Apart from it, there is another place which is known as Kadambahalli, which is also a Jainism place. It was created under the patronage of these rulers. As already mentioned, Western Ganga kings promoted the literature. So literature was Kannada, but also the Sanskrit literature. One of the very important texts written by Western Ganga ruler was Chavundaraya Purana, and it was written by Chavundaraya in 978 AD. It is one of the finest Kannada prose written in the earliest times. Moving on to fourth important dynasty of ancient India, it is the Kalachuri dynasty, which ruled in between 550 AD to 625 AD. It was a short-lived dynasty, and the area of their rule was basically the Malwa. But then the Malwa also included the place Ujjaini, and the capital of this dynasty was Maheshmati. So Maheshmati is very closer to Ujjaini, and it can be identified with one of the sub-town of the today's Ujjain. As far as the Kalachuris are concerned, their origin is uncertain. There is no clarity about that how this dynasty originated. But then epigraphic and numismatic evidences suggest that it is during their rule first of the monuments of the Ellora and Elephanta were created. Later on, these monuments were further expanded and further created and further improvised by the Rashtrakuta ruler. But please remember that it was the Kalachuri rulers who created the initial premises of the Ellora and so as the Elephanta. And as far as their demise is concerned, they lost their power to Western Chalukya after the rise of this Chalukya branch of the Badami. Another very important dynasty from the ancient India is the Ikshvaku dynasty. As far as the Ikshvaku of the Deccan are concerned, their rule was in between 225 AD to 340 AD. They were believed to be feudatories of the Satavahanas. But later on, after the demise of the Satavahanas, their importance increased in the areas of the Nagarjuna Konda. And in fact, the earliest name of the Nagarjuna Konda, which was known as Bijaypura, and later on, under the patronage of the Ikshvaku clan, it emerged as the Nagarjuna Konda Buddhist center. But then, when it comes to the history of the Ikshvaku clan, it goes back even thousands and thousands years back. So the Ikshvaku kings of Deccan, they claim their descent from the legendary king Ikshvaku, who is believed to existed thousands and thousands years ago. And in fact, it is believed that Ikshvaku king was actually the founder of the solar dynasty, what we call Surya Vans. And it is also believed that Lord Ram was the clan of the Ikshvakus. So according to the legendary stories, Ikshvaku clan existed in the Kosala and Ayodhya was their capital. And the Ikshvakus existed in the Indian history at one time or another time, but then they remain relevant in the Indian history. In fact, such is the importance of the Ikshvaku clan that even in Jainism, it is said that Adinath Rishabdev was also the descendant of the Ikshvaku clan. Similarly, even in Buddhism, some of the scholars, they believed that even Gautam Buddha was also one of the descendant of the Ikshvaku clan. As far as the Deccan Ikshvakus are concerned, they ruled in the area between Krishna and Godavari river, and later on they also lost their power to the Chalukyas. So moving on to the dynasty which connects to the ancient India to the medieval and so as it continues till the modern, that is 1947. So it is the Eastern Ganga dynasty of the Odisha. There were three phases of this dynasty. So the very initial phase was the early Eastern Ganga dynasty phase, that is basically from 493 to 1077 AD. The second phase is the Imperial Ganga dynasty phase, 1077 to 1436 AD. And the final phase is the Khemundi Ganga dynasty phase, which is from 1436 to 1947 till the independence of India. So the early Ganga dynasty, it covered the area of today's entire Odisha, which was earlier known as Kalinga. Not only this, but they also covered the area of the Andhra Pradesh, so as touching the parts of the Telangana and so as the parts of the Chhattisgarh. The earliest capital of Ganga dynasty was Kalinga Nagara, which is today's Mukhalingam district of the Odisha, and later on Cuttack became their capital, which was earlier known as Kattaka. Another very important thing to be noted about the Eastern Ganga dynasty, that their official language was Odia, and from here onwards Odia started to emerge as the language of this region. Moreover, Odia language emerged from the Odia Prakrit, and Prakrit are the natural languages of India. There were many varieties. Moving on further about this dynasty in today's world, it is more remembered for their world-renowned temple architectures, and some of the important temples which they have created, which still holds a very high relevance in the Hindu society, is Jagannath Temple of Puri, Sun Temple of Konark, Anant Vasudev Temple of Bhubaneswar, Narsingh Dev Temple of Seshachalam. These are some examples, and they created thousands of the temple which still exist. Last but not the least, in the medieval times, the currency of the Ganga dynasty was known as Fadam, and Fadam was also the currency of many other dynasties which were there in the different parts of the country. So as the Fadam was also the name of the currency of the Delhi Sultanate. Another important medieval dynasty is the Gajapati dynasty of Odisha, but as far as their rule is concerned, it extended from West Bengal to Andhra Pradesh. It started from the lower Ganga valley and extended till the mouth of the Kaveri river. So, effectively it included the entire Odisha, parts of the West Bengal, some parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and so as the Chhattisgarh. They were also a solar dynasty, and the regime of the Gajapati rulers existed between 1434 to 1541. As far as the Gajapati rule is concerned, they are more remembered for their patronage to the Hinduism and especially Vaishnavite tradition. It was the time when the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very high in this area, and majority of the rulers of the Gajapati dynasty, they started to follow the footsteps of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the relation to this particular Vaishnavite faith, they constructed many temples, and one of the notable temple is the Kapileshwar Temple of Bhubaneswar. Gajpatis were also the solar dynasty, which means that they belong to Suryavams. And in fact, many of the dynasties in India, they claim their descent to the sun god, just like the Ikshvaku. So lastly, due to their non-fighting nature, Gajapati rulers lost their power to Vijayanagar kingdom in the 16th century. Another very important dynasty from the medieval India was the Kakatiya dynasty, and Kakatiyas ruled entire Telangana, Andhra, parts of Odisha, and so as the parts of the upper Tamil Nadu. And their territory also included some parts of the Karnataka. As far as the Kakatiya rulers are concerned, the earliest evidence of their existence is from 800 AD. But then the first ruler who established the sovereignty was the Prataparudra I. As far as the naming of the Kakatiya rulers are concerned, they trace their name from the goddess Kakati, and goddess Kakati is believed to be the form of the goddess Durga, Ma Amba, Ma Sakti. Another thing, that Kakatiyas trace their origin to a person Durjaya, and Durjaya is believed to be the descendant of the Karikala Chola, the great Chola emperor of the early Chola phase. Ganapati Deva was the most important ruler of this dynasty, and it is during his regime the Kakatiya dynasty has reached to its maximum expanse, and its territorial climax has happened under the Ganapati Deva. The territory of the Kakatiyas at this time is in between the Godavari and the Krishna river, and moreover there is a constant struggle with the Yadava kingdom of the Devagiri. After Ganapati Deva, the next ruler of this dynasty or next ruler of this kingdom was Rudrama Devi. She is one of the earliest example of the female rulers in India, and she is also celebrated for her brave victory against the Yadava dynasty of the Devagiri. At the time of the Rudrama Devi, the famous Venetian traveler Marco Polo, he visited Warangal, which was the capital of the Kakatiyas. The old name of the Warangal was Orugali, and Marco Polo wrote high praises about the queen Rudrama Devi. And in fact, impressed by the bravery and the story of the Rudrama Devi, the government of India has also constituted a bravery award on her name, Rudrama Devi Award. After the regime of the Rudrama Devi, the next important ruler was the Prataparudra II, and Prataparudra II was the contemporary of the Alauddin Khilji. This is the time when Alauddin Khilji's campaign of the Warangal has started by his general, his trusted general Malik Kafur. In 1310, invasion of the Kakatiya kingdom has happened, and Prataparudra was defeated. So now Prataparudra was forced by Alauddin Khilji to pay the annual tribute, and this is the time when Prataparudra was forced to give the famous Kohinoor diamond to Alauddin Khilji, the mysterious diamond, and the diamond which has the history of curse also. You'll get to know it at another place. Kakatiyas were one of the finest temple builders. By this point of time, already the Dravid temple architecture has completely developed, and they created one of the very famous temple, that is the Ramappa Rudreshwar Temple. And this temple has now been inscribed in UNESCO Heritage Site. In 1323, the celebrated rule of the Kakatiyas with the attack of Tughlaq dynasty, and finally this dynasty was subsumed within the Delhi Sultanate. So moving on to one of the most important medieval dynasties, that is the Hoysala dynasty or establishment of the Hoysala kingdom. So the kingdom was in between 1000 AD to 1343, and this was the most powerful Kannadiga dynasty. They ruled entire modern Karnataka, also covering the areas from Kerala, Tamil Nadu, so as Andhra, and so as some parts of Maharashtra. The most important phase in the expansion of this kingdom happened when there was a fight between the Western Chalukyas and Kalachuris. So Hoysalas took advantage of this situation and they further expanded in the erstwhile areas of the Kalachuri and the Western Chalukya. Nripakam was the first initial important ruler who was somewhere around 1026 AD. But the most important ruler of this dynasty was Vishnuvardhan, whose regime existed from 1108 to 1152. And in 1116, King Vishnuvardhan defeated the Cholas, the imperial Cholas, who were known for their immense power in the southern India. This further improved the strength and the prestige and also the territory of the Hoysalas. Moreover, Hoysalas in today's time are more remembered for their contribution to the architectural scenario of India. They created one of the most unique and stupendous architecture of India, that is Hoysala temples. Some of the important temples in this particular category are Hoysaleshwara Temple of Halebidu, Chennakeshava Temple of Somnathpura and Chennakeshava Temple of Beluru. You can see on the screen I button. If you click on the I button, it will lead you to the details of the Hoysaleshwara temple, which has already been uploaded. Hoysala rulers also promoted the literature, and the two favored literature of their time was obviously the Kannada literature, so as the Sanskrit literature. And finally, the grand rule of the Hoysalas came to an end during the Tughlaq dynasty. The celebrated rule of Hoysalas came to a complete end in 1343 when it fell to Delhi Sultanate, and the last ruler of this dynasty was Veer Ballal Dev IV. So this name you must have heard in many movies and many places, but then this name was related to the Hoysala kings.
And this video is based on the probable topics from art and culture for this year prelims examination 2026. So as far as Indian art and culture is concerned, the questions that you get in the prelims paper are generally from architecture and sculpture. They are from music and dance, particularly the classical music, classical dance, and so as literature also forms a very good chunk of the questions. But then current developments like UNESCO Heritage and Tangible and Intangible Heritage, they are also asked in exam. But in this particular probable topic video, I'm not going to give you a very long list just like the classes. Obviously, it is the video based on the probable topics. So I will be narrowing it down to few topics which I feel is important. And if at all any question comes from these probable topics, definitely you will be having some sort of advantage. So coming to this, the most important topic which I feel in every year prelims examination from art and culture is Buddhism, Jainism and their philosophy. So in this video, I'm not going to teach you what you are already studying from different textbooks and notes and general information about the Buddhism, but I'm going to delve deeper into Buddhism and the difficult question from these parts, if at all it is asked, I will also be very much satisfied and honestly, I'll be happy for you. So let's go into the topics of the Buddhism, and notes of this topic I would be uploading on my Telegram channel t.me Culture Quantum. You can be associated with it to download my own handwritten notes of the Buddhism difficult themes. So let's start. So let's start with the Nikaya Buddhism. Nikaya Buddhism refers to the early sects of the Buddhism, which is before pre-Mahayana tendencies. So emergence of the Nikaya Buddhism happened in the Second Buddhist Council when the first schism in the Buddhist Mahasangha happened. Second Buddhist Council was held at Vaishali in 383 BC, and Buddhism formally got divided into two branches, that is Thavirvad and Mahasanghika. And in fact, from 383 to 250 BC, 18 branches emerged in the Nikaya Buddhism, out of which 12 were associated with the Thavirvad and 6 were associated with Mahasanghika. So these 18 branches in the early phase of the Buddhism are called as Ashtadas Nikaya. So the question is that why many branches of Nikaya Buddhism emerged in the early phase? So as far as the branching in Buddhism is concerned, there were many factors responsible for it. But when we talk about the immediate triggers of the division, the very first one would be the disputes related to the Vinaya. And what exactly it is? So there were disputes and the difference of opinion on what would be the monastic discipline and how the finances or money must be managed. Then apart from it, storage of salt. So some petty issues were also there in the difference of opinion. Apart from it, not just the Vinaya dispute was there, but there were the disputes related to the authorities of the elders and also the broader Buddhist community, that is Sangha. So often dispute was there that who would be the controlling authority, who would be the final interpreter authority, and these differences were not getting reconciled. So these were the immediate triggers of the branching in Buddhism. Then comes the fault line in the doctrines of the Buddhism, particularly the initial two branches, Thavirvad and Mahasangika. So on one hand, as Thavirvad, it is considering Buddha's nature, or basically Buddha was a human being with some of the perfect extraordinary abilities, and there was no question of the fallibility in this Thavirvad as far as the Buddha is concerned. But on the other hand, in Mahasangika, they are considering Buddha as transcendent, and in fact, according to them, they have allowed some degree of fallibility for the Buddha, and at the same point of time, they are going to develop the concept of the bodhisattvas in the later time. So according to them, Buddha is fallible, and so as he is transcendent, and moreover, they are creating space of the development of the concept of the bodhisattva in the later times. Then another difference in the doctrine was related to the dharmas. You must be thinking that what is the dharmas? Dharmas are basically that what is happening at one particular time. So the dispute was regarding that dharmas are momentary, are they kshanik, are they permanent, are they always there in past, present and future. So there were doctrinal faults on the lines of the dharmas also, and there was difference of opinion on the question of the arhat. So arhat ideal, arhat, who is arhat? Is he fallible? Is he transcendent? So as I mentioned earlier, that on these questions both Mahasangika and Thavirvad differed, and these doctrinal faults and then so as immediate triggers were responsible for initial division, which later on went on to become 18 branches of Buddhism, that is called as Ashtadas Nikaya of the Buddhism, and that's what we are calling Nikaya Buddhism. So let's have a look at what are the 18 branches of the Buddhism in the early phase. So the initial division in the Buddhism was Thavirvad and Mahasangika, and from these two trunks many subsects developed, particularly from the Thavirvad lineage 12 sects developed, and from Mahasangika lineage 6 sects developed. So as far as Thavirvad is concerned, it was conservative but analytical in nature, and the branches of the Thavirvad are as follows. So the first is Theravada, followed by Sravastivada, then Vibhajyavad, Mahisasaka, Dharmaguptaka, Kashyapya, Sautrantika, Hemavad, Vatsiputriya. Remember, Vatsiputriya is also called as Pudgalavad. Then it is followed by Dharmottariya, Bhadrayaniya and Samitya. On the other hand, Mahasangika lineage has 6 branches. So Mahasangikas were liberal, but they had transcendent tendency as far as the Buddha's concept and Bodhisattva's concept is concerned. So the 6 branches of Mahasangika is Mahasangika proper, Lokottarvad, Ek Vyavharika, Kaukuttika, Pranaptivad and Bahusritiya. So these are the 6 branches of the Mahasangika. And these branches, once again, I am repeating that all these 18 branches, 12 of Thavirvad and 6 of Mahasangika are called as Nikaya Buddhism. Another thing that you must note down, that Mahasangika led to the development of the Mahayana Buddhism. And you must have heard about that from the 4th Buddhist Council, a new name emerged in Buddhism, that is Hinayan Buddhism. Understand, Heenan is not a particular branch of Buddhism, but it is a polemic term. It is not the self-designation, but it is the name which was given by the Mahayana people to the early sects of the Sthavirvad. In fact, in today's time, the word Heenan is not used. As far as its tendencies are concerned, its tendencies are more similar to Theravada, but Theravada never calls itself as Heenan because it is a discriminatory term. So remember that Heenan is not a branch of Buddhism in today's time. It was just a polemic term given by the Mahayana Buddhism to the early sects of the Sthavirvad. What if in exam you are asked about the core differences between Sthavirvad and Mahasangika? I know that you have studied about the differences in Heenan and Mahayana Buddhism, but that's the thing of the past. The new questions could be based on the Sthavirvad and Mahasangika. So let's have a look at it. As far as Buddha is concerned, Sthavirvad considers that Buddha is a human being. On the other hand, Mahasangika considers him as transcendent. When it comes to the nature of the Arhat in both the sects, so in Sthavirvad, they consider Buddha as perfect, extraordinary being. But on the other hand, Mahasangika consider him as fallible. On the other hand, when it comes to the approach of both of them, so Sthavirvad was conservative but analytical. On the other hand, Mahasangika is liberal but expansive in nature. So these are the core differences. Let's move on to the next important part in the Buddhism, that is philosophical foundations of the Buddhism. And here, once again, I would be little different from what you study in the classes in the general phenomenon, but here it will be specific phenomenon. So when it comes to the doctrinal principles of the Buddhism or philosophical foundations of the Buddhism, the first and the foremost would be the Four Noble Truths. In the Buddhist philosophy, Four Noble Truths are not the dogmas, but they are the diagnostic methods. So the very first one in this is the dukkha. Dukkha is not just the pain, but it is the state of unsatisfactoriness all the time. Then comes after the dukkha is samudaya. Samudaya is rooted in the craving and avidya. What is avidya? Avidya is ignorance. Then comes nirodha. Nirodha is cessation, and it is cessation of the unconditioned state. And the last one is the magga, which is Eightfold Path. And Eightfold Path is a methodology that how to break the chain of the dukkha from this world. Second important foundational philosophical principle in Buddhism is pratitya samutthapad, which is also called as dependent origination. So according to Buddhism, that cyclic existence in this world is called as samsara, and when one is born in the samsara, one is bound to have dukkha. But how this happened? So this cyclic samsara and dukkha are interrelated with each other through 12 link chains, and these are called as 12 link chains Dwadas Nidan. Then these 12 link chains are interconnected with each other and they are not self-inherent in nature. So there is a dependent origination. And according to Buddhism, if we are able to break this 12 link chains, so then one gets liberation from the cycle of birth and death, that is, one gets freed from the samsara. So let's elaborate on the 12 causal links or Dwadas Nidan in Buddhism. The very first is ignorance, and in Buddhism they call it avidya. So ignorance of what? Basically it says that ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. Then the second one after ignorance is samskar, formations. And what is formations? It is basically the formation of the karma through the volitional action. So karma in Buddhism and Jainism, remember, it is a negative terminology. It's not a positive terminology. Just like in today's time, we call it acha karma, bura karma. So it is not acha karma, bura karma. Karma is negative phenomenon. Third is Vigyan, which is consciousness. So basically, what is consciousness or Vigyana? It is awakening of consciousness in a new life. Then comes Namru, form and body, and it is the development of mental and physical body. After Namrup comes Sadayatan. Sadayatan is the formation of the 6 sensory organs. So 6 sensory organs are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. After the Sadayatan, Sparsh, that is contact. And Sparsh is what? It is the contact between the different sensory organs. Then, seventh number in the causal chain is Vedana. Vedana is sensation. Sensation of what? Sensation of pain, sensation of pleasantness, sensation of neutrality. So, this is basically sensation. So, number 8 is Trishna, that is craving, and it is very important in the causal link chain. So, Trishna is basically all of us. We desire the pleasurable things and we try to escape out unpleasurable ones from our life. Then comes Upadan. What is Upadan? Upadan is revisiting those desirable things in our life. And then comes Bhav, which means becoming. So Bhav is what? That producing the karma which leads to the future birth and rebirth. After the Bhava comes Jati, which is rebirth or the new existence. And the last one is Jaramarad. Jaramarad is all about that inevitable sorrow in life and so as decay and aying in the life. That is what the cycle of birth, death, rebirth, and it will go on, so forth, until and unless it is eliminated by nirvana. There is more to Dwadas Nidan. The first two, avidya and samskaras, are associated with the previous life, and the next 8 are associated with the present life, and the last two, that is jati and jarmarad, are associated with the future life. Now understand that as per the Buddhist concepts, when you eliminate the avidya and the trishna, the number 1 and the number 8, so avidya and trishna, when they are eliminated, so the causal link chain is broken and one is free from the cycle of birth, rebirth, death, and this is what we call the state of nirvana. So nirvana is achieved and one is liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Another very important thing associated with it, that the Dwadas Nidan is depicted on the outer rim of the Bhava Chakra. Now you must be thinking, what is Bhava Chakra? Bhava Chakra is a circular depiction of the different concepts associated with the Buddhism, and though there are other things in the middle part of the Bhava Chakra, but on the outer rim or the outer part, the 12 Nidans are depicted. Third important philosophical foundational concept in Buddhism is the concept of Anatma, which is the doctrine of the non-self. Buddhists do not believe in the Upanishadic concept of the permanent self. In fact, they believe that self is not a substance, but it is a process. And according to them, they do not call for the permanent self, but instead Panchaskanda. And what is Panchaskanda? Panchaskanda is Rupa, Vedana, Samagya, Samskar, and Vijnana. The fourth philosophical foundation is the concept of anicca and dukkha. What is anicca? Impermanence, and so is dukkha is the suffering. So Buddhism says that all the conditioned phenomena are momentary in nature, and when we are attached to these momentary phenomena, the things which are impermanent, it leads to the dukkha, and that's what is inevitable when man is born in the samsara. Next important philosophical aspect of the Buddhism is the philosophical interpretation of nirvana. Meaning of nirvana is not similar in Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. So according to Theravada Buddhism, it is the individual nirvana, that is the nirvana of the self. But on the other hand, Mahayana Buddhism talks about the universal nirvana and not about the individual nirvana. Moreover, the meaning of nirvana in Theravada is the cessation of the defilements. But on the other hand, Mahayana Buddhism says that it is the status of the emptiness, sunyata. Sixth principle is the ethics and social philosophy in the Buddhism. So ethics is called as seal. And for normal followers or the laity, Buddhism prescribes Panchasil. So what comes under the Panchasil? The very first one is ahimsa, that is non-violence. Asteya, do not take the property which has not been given to you. Then comes after the asteya, kamesu michakkara. What is it? That one must not indulge in the sexual misconduct. Then comes surmiraya. Surmiraya means that one must abstain from the intoxicating drinks. And muzvad. Muzvad is that one must not indulge in the false speech. So in a way, it seems similar to what has been prescribed in Buddhism, but that is what the feature of all the Oriental religions, that they very much emphasize on these type of the disciplines. On the other hand, when it comes to that what must be followed by the monks, so monks are completely ordained towards the Vinaya Pitak. So they have to follow the Vinaya principles, and for them, discipline was more important than the normal followers, laity or the upasakas. And moreover, development of the Chetana is important for all the followers, but most important for the monks. The last foundational principle is epistemology of the Buddhism. Buddhism believes in the direct perception of the reality and inference, that is pratyaksha and anuman. But in the later times, Dharmakirti and Dignag, they developed the pramana theory in the Buddhism, which is basically the logic theory in the Buddhism. When Buddhism, Jainism and Ajivika were getting consolidated in India, so at that point of time, there was one more theological principle and philosophical principle that was called as Uchchedavad. So Uchchedavad is the theory of the complete annihilation, and it was propounded by Ajit K. Skambalin. So what is Uchchedavad? It talks about that with the end of a particular life, everything comes to an end. All the physical forms and everything comes to an end. There is nothing like soul. There is nothing like afterlife. There is nothing like afterbirth. So it denies everything. It talks about complete annihilation of the physical form which is there in this birth, and there is no traces of it in the next birth. In 2024, Government of India gave classical recognition to 5 more languages, that is Pali, Prakrit, Maharashtri, that is Marathi language, and so as Bengali and Assamese language. So now there are total 11 languages which have classical status. So the very first language which got the classical status was Tamil, followed by Sanskrit, then Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Odia, and now in 2024 these 5 languages. So I was expecting question from this particular section last year, but it was not asked. But still this year you can expect a question from this section. Not a difficult question would be asked, but you must remember the year in which these languages were given classical status. So what are these languages? Once again, I'm repeating. The languages are Pali, Prakrit, Assamese, Bengali and Marathi language. UNESCO World Heritage Sites are also very important question in the prelims examination. There are so many World Heritage Sites, but you don't need to remember all of them. You just need to remember the last 5-year UNESCO World Heritage Site. So let's start with the last 5 years. In 2021, the Indus Valley Civilization city Dholavira was given World Heritage Site. Then in 2023, Santi Niketan and so as the Sacred Ensemble of the Hoysalas in Belur, Somnathpura and Halebedu were given the World Heritage status. And in 2024, the Moidoms of the Assam, which is basically the burial mounds of the Assam, were given UNESCO Heritage status. And in 2025, the strategic 12 Maratha forts panning across Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu were given the World Heritage Site status. So these 5 you remember, their years you remember. If a question comes, definitely you will be at advantage. In the intangible cultural heritage of the humanity from India, in last 5 years, 3 recognitions were there. That is, in 2021, Durga Puja of Kolkata was recognized. In 2023, Garba, which is a devotional dance festival, was recognized. And then last year, that is in 2025, Deepavali was also included in the intangible cultural heritage of the humanity.
So let's cover this part related to art and culture, most important topic. So the important topic number 1 is classical literature of India. There has been some new addition in the classical literature of India, and moreover, there has also been some sort of modification in the rules which have been laid down by Sahitya Academy for recognizing the classical literature. So the new criteria laid down by Sahitya Academy in 2024 includes, number 1, there must be antiquity of the text. They must be more than 1500 to 2000 years old. Number 2, it must be regarded as heritage by the generation of the speakers of that particular language. Third, there must be knowledge text. What is knowledge text? Basically, there must be prose text apart from the poetry, and it also says that there must be epigraphical and inscriptional evidence of the language. And last but not the least, the classical literature might differ from the today's form of that language. Moreover, it must be distinct from the offshoots of that language in later ages. So these are the 4 criterions which have been decided by Sahitya Academy, and if the languages fulfill these criterions, so they will be enlisted in the classical literature list. So let's talk about which all languages are classical. So Tamil was the very first language which was given classical status in 2004, followed by Sanskrit in 2005, followed by Kannada and Telugu in 2008. Both the languages were given recognition on the same day. Then comes Malayalam in 2013 and Odia in 2014. Last year in 2024, Sahitya Academy has decided to give classical literature status to Marathi language, so as Pali and Prakrit, Assamese and Bengali. As far as the states concerned with these languages, so Marathi language and literature mainly concerns with the Maharashtra, Pali and Prakrit with Bihar, UP and MP, and so as Assamese from Assam and Bengali from Bengal. One more thing I want to add in this part, that Marathi developed from Maharashtri Prakrit, and moreover Assamese and Bengali, they developed from Magadhi Prakrit. Another very important detail I would like to add in this, that Gatha Saptasati, written by one of the Satavahan king, Hala, is believed to be one of the initial example of the Marathi, and it was actually written in Maharashtri Prakrit. Second important topic is also related to languages. Very recently, Google has announced that it will be developing Google Translate of 110 Indian languages, and it has already added some of the Indian tribal languages in the Google Translate, which includes Kokborok of Tripura, and it is the lingua franca of the 19 tribal communities of Tripura. Apart from it, Tulu, Marwadi, Awadhi and Khasi has also been added into Google Translate, and Santhali is already the part of the Google Translate. Another very important information related to Santhali, that perhaps it is the first tribal language of India whose Windows system has been developed in its script, which is called as Olchiki. Ministry of Tribal Affairs of India is developing the digital archives related to the tribal languages of India. It's a very august initiative of the Ministry of Tribal Affairs to protect the endangered tribal languages of India. Important topic number 3. Kozhikode city of Kerala has been recognized as the first literature city of India. The city boasts of more than 500 libraries and more than 70 publications. Fourth important topic is basically manuscript of 3 Indian literature, that is Ramcharitmanas, Panchatantra and Sahardya Lok Lochana, has been recorded in the Language Register of Asia Pacific. It is an initiative of UNESCO which started back in 1992. Moving to important topic number 4. Very recently, UNESCO has recognized Chirao Dev Moidams in Assam in the UNESCO Tangible Heritage List site. Chirao Dev Moidams are basically burial sites of the Ahom Dynasty in the foothills of Patkai hill range. Apart from it, in 2023, 2 more sites were added into UNESCO Heritage List. That includes Santiniketan of West Bengal, and so as the sacred ensembles of the Hoysalas, which includes Hoysaleshwara Temple, Chennakeshava Temple of Somnathpura and Chennakeshava Temple of Belur. So moving to important topic number 5, and it is based on Buddhism. Very often UPSC has asked questions based on Buddhism, like epithets of the Buddha, which was asked last year, like Sakyamuni, Tathagat. So there are some other famous epithets of the Buddha, like Samyak Sambuddha. What does it mean? That the perfect Buddha, the enlightened Buddha, and the one who is above all of them. So it is an epithet to the Buddha. Then another very important epithet is Sugat. Buddha Ghosh has mentioned that meaning of the Sugat is that Buddha, by both the ways, he was well gone. The exact meaning is well gone. So when he has chosen to come to the earth, that is good. And when he is gone from the earth, that is also good. So the original meaning of the Sugat is well gone, and it is an epithet to the Buddha. Apart from it, Bodhisattvas are also known with many different names like Lokeshwar and Lokasattva. So, if in exam it comes that what is Lokasattva, what is Lokeshwar, so it is basically another synonym of the Bodhisattva. Mahasattva, Loknath, Lokeshwar are the different epithets which are given to Bodhisattvas. So, if it comes in exam, identify it as a epithet which are given to Bodhisattvas. Moving on to the next part is basically the Lokottarvad branch of Buddhism. Basically, Lokottarvad means that knowledge of the transcendence. And Lokottarvad was one of the main important branch of Mahasanghika. In fact, there were three important branches of Mahasanghika, which includes Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad. So what is the difference between the three branches? Lokottarvad says that Buddha Vachan were transcendent in nature, but Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad, they say that teachings of the Buddha are both transcendent and provisional. So remember that teachings of the Buddha are transcendent and provisional in Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad. Another very important theme from the Buddhism is Madhyamika philosophy. Nagarjuna was the founder of the Madhyamika philosophy, and it is basically elaboration of the middle path which has been prescribed by Buddha. So he was the main philosopher, he was the founder, but Aryadev was also one of the important contributor to the Madhyamika philosophy, which was initiated by Nagarjuna. So the important work of Nagarjuna in which this philosophy is mentioned is called as Madhyamak Karak, or it is also known as Madhyamak Sastra. Another very important Buddhist scholar is Dignag. There was a question based on him last year. So Dignag is known for establishing school of logic, Hetu Vidya in Buddhism, which gets some sort of inspiration from the Nyaya school of Hinduism. Dignag is also known for writing three momentous works, and these works are Praman Samuchaya, Alamban Pariksha and Nyaya Mukha. So today you learnt about some of the important topics which are expected to be coming in this year exam, but I have some suggestion from my side that you must read. Please read Mahakumbh, and moreover you can also go and look at the Mahakumbh video covered by Culture Quantum. Then apart from it, you can also read some of the epithets of the Mahavir like Nigantha and Nayaputta. So Nigantha means that the one who was without clothes, and Nayaputta is indicative of his Janantrika clan. So these topics you must read additional to what we are covering over here. Moreover, you can also refer to the book A Journey Through Indian Art and Culture written by me and Anutosh. Let's start. The most important topic. Very often in the recent past, what we have seen that many questions have been asked from the Vedic period, in mains examination also and in prelims examination also. So when it comes to the Vedic age, or particularly the early Vedic age, there has been mention of large number of the gods and goddess in Rigveda. So let's discuss about some of the important goddess from Rigveda. Very first one, Usha. Usha is considered as a beautiful goddess. She is associated with the sunrise or dawn, and her name is mentioned many a times in Rigveda. The second important goddess from the Rigvedic period is Aditi. Aditi is considered as mother of sun god, and she is also associated with the proceedings of the day. Third important Rigvedic goddess is Sinivali, and she is associated with fertility and also the protection of the children. Then another very important Rigvedic goddess is Raka. She is considered as the goddess of the full moon, or she is the goddess of the moon. Likewise, Hinduism. In some of the branches of the Buddhism, there is mention of the polytheistic practices. That means worship of God and goddess both. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, there is mention of many goddess. For example, Tara, Mahamayuri, Akshobhaya. But one goddess she is often mentioned in the Buddhist text is Hariti. Hariti believed to be
she was demoness and she used to devour the childrens. But as per the belief in the Buddhism, later on she was converted by Buddha and she became a goddess of the good purpose. Now her function got related with the protection of the children and moreover fertility. I have noted that many questions in UPSC paper, particularly from art and culture and ancient and medieval history, are based on some terms and terminologies. So, one of the term and terminology related to the bow and arrow and what name has been mentioned related to bow and arrow in the culture and the history of India. So, let's start with the very first one, that is Shranga. Shranga is considered as bow and arrow, tir or dhanush of Lord Vishnu. Similarly, Lord Ram is often depicted with bow and arrow, and Lord Ram's bow and arrow is called as Kodanda. Then apart from it, you must have heard about zodiac sign Sagittarius. And zodiac sign Sagittarius also depicts some bow and arrow which is called as Karmaka. Apart from bow and arrow, other weapons are also depicted in the Indian literature or Hindu literature. For example, Konta, which is javelin, has been often depicted in the Hindu literature, and many of the gods are depicted with the Kunta also. For example, Bhagwan Kartikeya or God Kartikeya is also depicted with the Kunta. One very important personality from the Indian history and culture is Katyayan. And Katyayan can be placed somewhere in 3rd century BCE. So as far as the Katyayan timeline is concerned, before him was the Padini, and then is the Katyayan, and then Patanjali. So Katyayan was a grammarian, and moreover he was a Sanskrit literary figure. Apart from it, he was also a mathematician. And the notable works of the Katyayan are in the field of mathematics, Sanskrit grammar, and so as the astrology. So some of the books authored by Katyayan includes Vartikakar and Salbasutras and Vyakaran. So these are the three notable works. Once again, I am repeating that he wrote Vartikakar, Vyakaran and Salbasutras. Moreover, his Salbasutra is basically a commentary on Padini's Astadhyay. Moving ahead with further information related to Katyayan, that as you know, very frequently UPSC asks questions related to the timeline. So timelines are generally asked in ancient medieval section, but it can be asked related to the personalities also. So when it comes to standout personalities from Sanskrit grammar in the ancient Indian scenario, the first name which will come to the fore would be Padini. Then he was followed by Katyayan, and then after Patanjali, who wrote Mahabhashya, which was a commentary on Padini's Astadhyay, and the last would be the Amar Simha, who wrote Amar Kos. And Amar Simha was the courtier of Chandragupta II, the Gupta ruler. Moreover, Amar Simha was also contemporary of Kalidas. Next important theme from art and culture, which can be expected to be coming in this year exam, is basically some of the Bengali literature. As you know, the Bengali language has been given classical status last year, and so as some of the important literature becomes important. Very first one is Dharma Mangal. Dharma Mangal is medieval Bengali poetry based on Mangal Kavya. And what is Mangal Kavya? It is basically the appreciation and celebration of the folk deities of the Bengal. Another very important medieval Bengali literature is Vidya Sundar. Vidya Sundar is a poem which has been written by many authors in Bengal, but all the authors, they have followed the style of Chaur Panchasika, which was written by Kashmiri Pandit Billana. And Vidya Sundar is based on the love story of Vidya and Sundar, and it has erotic elements also. Moving on to the next important literature from the Bengali language from the medieval period, and particularly middle of the 18th century, is Shiva Sankirtan. And Shiva Sankirtan is also called as Sibayan. It was written by Ramakrishna Bhattacharya. And as the name suggests that it is related to Shiva Sankirtan, but the major theme of Shiva Sankirtan is based on the agrarian practices which were prevalent in Bengal during the middle of the 18th century, and so as the previous ages also. Next important theme is based on Akbar. Very often people get confused that what is Akbarnama and what is Aine-Akbari. Is Aine-Akbari part of Akbarnama or Akbarnama part of Aine-Akbari? Are they same or are they different? So let's clear this particular confusion related to the Akbarnama and Aine-Akbari. Aine-Akbari is the part of Akbarnama. Moreover, Akbarnama is the biography of Akbar, which was written by one of his closest friend, Abul Fazl. And there are three parts of Aine-Akbari. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are purely related to the Akbar's life from birth until he becoming the king of India. But the Volume 3 is Aine-Akbari, and it reflects on the administrative practices during the Akbar's period, his initiatives related to the administration, and apart from it, Aine-Akbari also reflects on the different practices which were prevalent in India. For example, one interesting take in Aine-Akbari is Akbar prescribing people to practice Ayurveda. And in fact, though it is not a vivid description of Ayurveda, but some of the benefits of the Ayurveda has been enlisted in Aine-Akbari. After the establishment of Delhi Sultanate in north and northwestern India, patronage to the Sanskrit literature declined. But Sanskrit continued as the language of the intellectuals, and in many of the hilly areas and the hilly kingdoms, Sanskrit was patronized. In this series, the most important name from the medieval period is the ninth ruler of the Kashmir Sultanate, Zainul Abidin, who ruled in between 1418 to 1470. He is considered as the father of cultural renaissance in Kashmir, and he patronized many of the Sanskrit poets of that time. Moreover, at this particular time, it is seen that influence of the Persian and Arabic literature on Sanskrit literary things. For example, Bhattavatar wrote Jain Vilas, which is basically the history of rulers of Kashmir, and Bhattavatar in Jain Vilas, he has followed Firdausi's Shahnama writing style. He was not the only Sanskrit author who was patronized by Jainal Abidin. In fact, another very important Sanskrit literary figure from this period was Jonaraj. And Jonaraj, under the patronage of Jainal Abidin, wrote Rajatarangini Dvitiya or Dvitiya Rajatarangini. So first Rajatarangini was written by Kalhana, which is also the history of the rulers of the Kashmir. And this is the continuation of the first Rajtarangini, which continues with the history of the rulers of the Kashmir, particularly in the medieval period. After the Jonaraj, another very important literary figure who was patronized by Jainal Abidin was Srivara. And Srivara has also followed the Persian style in Sanskrit poetry writing. For example, in his poetry Katha Kautuk, which is based on the love story of Yusuf and Zulaikha, he followed the Persian style of Sanskrit poetry. Moreover, Srivar is also known for writing Raj Tarangini Tritiya, which is also the continuation of the history of the rulers of the Kashmir. In the early medieval times, Advait Vedant philosophy was propounded by Sankaracharya, Adi Sankaracharya, who was born in Kerala in the 8th century AD. And Sankaracharya is famous for his intellectual debate with the Mandan Mishra. Now, after this entire thing has happened, one very important philosopher who emerged in 9th century AD and he continued till 10th century AD was Vachaspati Mishra. He was also one of the philosophers of Advait Vedant. And moreover, he did a tremendous work by harmonizing the thoughts of Mandan Mishra with the thoughts of Sankara. Apart from it, it is also said that Vachaspati Mishra is associated with the Bhamati school or Bhamati Prasthan. And this Bhamati Prasthan is associated with Vachaspati Mishra. And moreover, it is based on the commentaries on Sankara's Brahma Sutra Bhasya. As far as the writings of the Vachaspati Mishra is concerned, he wrote Tattva Bindu, which is one of the most important philosophical work of that time. And what is Tattva Bindu? Drop of knowledge. Amir Khusro was one of the profound personalities of Delhi Sultanate period. He was a court poet of Balban, and then he continued during the tenure of Alauddin Khilji also and he also saw the rule of the Tughlaqs. He is a great literary figure. In fact, he authored near about 99 books. His books were in Urdu language also, and so as in the Persian language. The speciality of Amir Khusro is that he was the first Muslim scholar who started using the Indian idioms, words and phrases in Urdu literature and Persian literature. So just the way that Persian literature has influenced some of the Sanskrit writings in Kashmir, similar way that Sanskrit has inspired some of the writings of Amir Khusro. Some of the books, let's mention that some of the important notable works of Amir Khusro, for example, Nusifir, in which he has mentioned about the climate, topography, beauty of India, and he has expressed his love for India. Another very important work of Amir Khusro is Hast Behist. So, meaning of the Hast Behist is 8 paradises, which is basically the Islamic conception of the paradise or heaven. Apart from it, he wrote Tughlaqnama. Tughlaqnama is based on the life and the tenure of the Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Then he also wrote Khizain-ul-Futuh. In Khizain-ul-Futuh, he mentions about the tenure of Alauddin Khilji. In Sikandarnama, or basically we can say Ain-e-Sikandari, he has mentioned about the tenure of the Alexander. Apart from it, he also wrote one very famous book, Deval Rani Khijr Khani, which is based on unfortunate fate of Deval Rani, who was married to the son of Alauddin Khijr Khan. Apart from it, he also wrote Laila Majnu, though it is not his original authorship. Laila Majnu was already written by many authors in the Middle East, but the Persian and the Urdu version was written by Amir Khusro. So remember the writings of the Amir Khusro, there could be a possibility that some of the books of the Amir Khusro can be asked in this year prelims. In the recent past, government has come up with many initiatives related to education. Some of the important schemes related to education are Nistha. Nistha is integrated teachers training program. Then comes Vidyanjali. Vidyanjali is a program initiated by MHRD and it aims to bring more participation of the private sector in school education. Then comes Vidya Parvez. Vidya Parvez is basically an initiative for school prep. Basically, it's a kind of a kids school initiative whereby 3-month program would be there for the kids who are about to be getting enrolled in the normal class scenario. Then comes another very important program, Diksha. So Diksha scheme of the government is associated with the digital repository creation for the learning of the students from the different fields and from different parts of the country. In first important theme video based on art and culture, we talked about some of the textbooks from India included in the World Memory Register, which is an initiative of UNESCO started in 1992. So previous week, UNESCO has announced that it is going to add Bhagavad Gita and Natya Shastra in the UNESCO World Memory Register. Bhagavad Gita, as you all know, it is the teachings of the Lord Krishna to Arjuna related to the observation of the Dharma. And Natya Shastra is an epic treatise on dance, drama and music which was authored by Bharat Muni. So add with it that what was covered in the previous video and please revise those videos also. So apart from the 2 important videos on art and culture this year, please go to the last year important topics which were predicted to be coming in the 2024 exam, because some you can expect in this year paper also.
One of the frequently asked topic is the edicts and inscriptions of the Asoka. There are total 33 inscriptions of the Asoka which can be categorized into minor rock inscriptions, major rock inscription, major pillar inscriptions, minor pillar inscriptions and so as the cave inscriptions. In majority of his inscriptions, Asoka has mentioned himself as Devanam Piya Piyadasi, which means beloved of the gods. And long before the inscriptions of Asoka deciphered, nobody knew that who was this Devanam Piya Piyadasi. Because in the inscriptions of Asoka, it's very rare that his name was mentioned. In the initially discovered inscriptions, only Devanam Piya Piyadasi was mentioned. So,
James Prinsep, who deciphered Brahmi and Kharoshthi script, and these scripts were in the Prakrit language. He was also confused that whose name is Devanampiya Piyadasi, and he got a clue, and this clue was from Sri Lankan Chronicle of Deepavams and Mahavams, which has mentioned that Devanampiya Piyadasi is the name of the great king Ashoka. So from here the mystery was solved that Devanampiya Piyadasi was the name of Ashoka, and the source is the Sri Lankan text of the Deepavams and Mahavams. Moving ahead, there are 4 inscriptions of Ashoka where his name Ashoka is mentioned, not Devanampiya Piyadasi, and these inscriptions are Nittur, Udagulam, Maski and Gurjara. These minor inscriptions of the Ashoka were created in the internal parts of the Ashoka's territory, and the 14 major rock inscriptions were on the borders of his territory or the frontiers of his territory. It's a very important thing to note down that the major rock inscriptions were on the frontiers of his territory. In the last phase of the Ashoka's campaign of Dhamma, 7 major pillar inscriptions were added, and as I mentioned, please note it down that it was the last phase when the 7 pillar inscriptions were created. Then comes the 3 cave inscriptions. So these 3 cave inscriptions are in Barabar hills of Gaya, or right now the district is Jahanabad in Bihar. The cave inscriptions are located at Sudama caves, Karan Chopper cave and Vishwakarma cave of Bihar. Apart from it, Kandhar inscription of Ashoka is the most unique, and it is the only bilingual inscription of Ashoka which is written in Greek and Aramaic language. Then coming to the language and the script of the Ashokan inscriptions or Mauryan inscriptions. So the language and the script of the Ashokan inscription, majorly it was in the Prakrit language and Brahmi script, but then Kharoshthi script was also used. As far as the frontiers of the Ashoka's territories are concerned, so Greek language, Aramic language and Greek and Aramic inscriptions were, I believe is important for this exam is the Ellora cave. Ellora cave has total 34 caves, 17 belonging to Hinduism, 12 to Buddhism and 5 to Jainism. So the Buddhist caves are full of the many specimens of the Buddhism. And one of the interesting fact about the Ellora cave, that cave premise number 10 of Ellora is known as Vishwakarma cave. But as you might be expecting that it may be dedicated to the Hindu god Vishwakarma, but actually it is dedicated to the Buddha, who is regarded as the craft god in Buddhism, as he is also regarded as the craft god in Hinduism. So please make a note of it. Whenever you are asked in exam that about Vishwakarma cave of the Ellora, so mark it Buddhist cave, not the Hindu cave. Then another very interesting fact about the Ellora cave is basically it is the first site in India where Ashtabodhisattva Mandal is represented. And what is this Ashtabodhisattva Mandal? That Buddha is in the middle and he is surrounded by 8 Bodhisattvas. Some of the important Bodhisattvas are Vajrapani, Padampani, Avalokiteshvara, Akasgarbh, Kshittigarbh and Manjushri and Maitreya. So these Bodhisattvas are represented. Moreover, who are Bodhisattvas? So as I hope you must be knowing or you must have studied that Bodhisattvas are regarded as the previous birth of the Buddha. They are capable of achieving nirvana, but they postpone their own nirvana so that they can help all the sentient beings. And in many lifetimes when they have helped large number of the sentient beings, so they naturally progresses to the path of the Buddhahood. Another very important and interesting fact about the Ellora, that it was the center of the Vajrayana Buddhism, which is the Tantric Buddhism. And many of the practices of the Ellora are very similar to the practices of Tantricism in the Hinduism. Apart from it, another interesting feature is presence of the female deities who are represented in the Ellora caves. For example, the images and the sculptures of the Tara. And Tara is the symbol of the energy and she is considered as the counterpart of the Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara is the Lord who looks down with the compassion. Apart from it, there are other female deities are also represented. Second most important is the Mahamayuri. And as far as Vajrayana Buddhism is concerned, please do remember that Vajrayana Buddhism developed in the universities or the Buddhist Mahavihars of Nalanda and Vikramshila. And it is from this particular area that Vajrayana Buddhism has made its traditional dance. This dance is performed during Navratra festival and 9 days this performance goes on. So what is the story behind the Garba dance form. So basically, in this dance form, in the center, an earthen pot is kept, and there are many holes in this earthen pot. And in this particular earthen pot, a diya or the lamp is placed, and the light of the diya is coming out from the holes. So basically, what is the importance of this earthen pot? It is the representative of the Garbha, and Garbha is the reason why it is called as Garbha or Garba. So this earthen pot is representative of the energy of the Shakti or Ma Amba, and people dance around this earthen pot in anti-clockwise fashion, and this performance continues for 9 days, and so as performance includes the recitation of the songs and some sort of mantras. Another very important fact to note down is Garba must not be confused with the Dandiya. Dandiya is a separate performance, it is not at all related to Garba. So please make a note of it. And I believe that this is an important topic which could be asked in this year's exam. Moving on to next important topic for this year's exam is the UNESCO Tangible Cultural Heritage Site, which was recently included in the list from India, and that is Santiniketan. So Santiniketan made its entry into the tangible list in year 2023. Santiniketan was actually founded by Rabindranath Tagore in 1901. Santiniketan was designed to be the center of art and the center of education, and in fact, it has played a very vital role in the growth of the Bengal School of Art. In the present time, Santiniketan is better known as Vishwa Bharati University Shantiniketan Bolpur area of the Bengal. One very interesting fact about the Santiniketan is the house in which Rabindranath Tagore resided is the part of the cultural heritage site, and it is in the campus of the Vishwa Bharati University Shantiniketan. So moving on to the next important topic for this year's exam, and this topic hasn't been asked in last 2-3 years. So as the name suggests, that Shad Darshan, which means that there would be 6 schools of philosophy in Shad Darshan. So what is the basis of this classification? It is very important to note down that Shad Darshan or the orthodox philosophies are called as Astika philosophy. On the other hand, heterodox philosophy is called as Nastika philosophy. But then, as per the belief system, that Astika is the belief in the God and Nastika is the non-belief in the God. This is the idea which is not applicable. I'm again re-emphasizing on it. It is not applicable in the schools of philosophy. In the school of philosophy, Astika means belief in the divine authority of the Veda, and in the schools of philosophy, Nastika means rejection or refutation of the divine authority of the Veda. So the 6 schools of philosophy or the orthodox schools of philosophy which accepted the divine authority of the Veda are Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisesika, Mimamsa and Vedanta. On the other hand, the heterodox philosophy, that is Nastika philosophy, includes Buddhism, Jainism, Charvak and Ajivika. And once again, I'm emphasizing, please note it down, that Nastika means refutation of the belief in the Veda or rejection in the divine authority of the Vedas. It has nothing to do with the belief in the God. So moving on to another interesting aspect of the 6 orthodox schools of philosophy is the creation of the yugma in this philosophy. So for example, Sankhya and Yoga are considered as a yugma, Nyaya Vaisesika are considered as a yugma, and Mimamsa Vedanta are considered as a yugma. But what is this concept of the yugma? Basically, there is some sort of similarity between the 2 schools of philosophy, and that's why they are considered as yugma. So for example, when it comes to Sankhya and Yoga, they are a yugma on the basis of acceptance of the concept of the Purusha and Prakriti. Coming down to the Nyaya and Vaisesika, both of them are considered to be the school of logic, that is their similarity. And the last one, that is Mimamsa and Vedanta. So Mimamsa is also called as Purva Mimamsa, and Vedanta is also called as Uttar Mimamsa. So their similarity is basically with the naming itself. And the word Mimamsa means reflection. So these 2 philosophies are reflections on the Vedas. So Mimamsa is the early reflection on the Veda and Vedanta is the end reflections on the Veda. That's why they are called as Yugma in the orthodox philosophy. So please do remember, Sankhya Yoga is a Yugma, Nyaya Vaisesika is a Yugma, and Mimans Vedanta is a Yugma. Coming to the heterodox philosophies, Buddhism, Jainism, Charvak and Ajivika are in this category. But Buddhism and Jainism are different from the Ajivika and Charvaka. So what is this difference? So basically Buddhism and Jainism, like the other orthodox schools of philosophy, believe in the rebirth and salvation. But Charvakas completely reject the concept of salvation, and Ajivikas considered the concept of salvation as a fallacy. Another very important fact of the Astika school or Six Orthodox philosophy that you must remember, that if you get a question whereby if they are asking that they believe in birth, rebirth, death, soul, salvation, so please mark it correct. All the Astika schools, all the Six Orthodox schools of philosophy, they believe in the divine authority of Veda, they believe in the concept of soul, they believe in the rebirth, and they talk about the salvation. So please remember it. Another important topic that you all must be taking into the consideration is the temple architecture of India. So let's have a quick review of the temple architecture of India. So the temple architecture of India has a vivid variety, but some important styles are Nagar style, Dravid style, Vesar style and Hoysal style. As far as the Nagar style is concerned, it was mainly practiced in the northern part of India, and the interesting and the important or the characteristic feature of the Nagar style is the presence of the curvy linear tower Sikhar. Another thing to be noted down, that in the Nagar style generally the boundary walls were not created, and in the beginning the temples were created on the banks of the river. That's why in majority of the Nagar temples you may not find any water tank tradition. Exceptions could be there, but this is the general conception. Another thing is to be noted down, that the temples were created according to the concepts or the laws or the dharmas mentioned in the Vastu Shastra and Vishnu Dharmottar Puran. Another thing is to be noted down, be it the Nagar or the Dravid style, the tower of the temple, that is Shikhar or Viman, it is considered as equivalent to the Kailas Parvat or the Meru Parvat, which is mentioned in the Hindu literature. Another important fact to be noted down in the temple architecture, be it any style, is the Garbhagriha. As the name itself suggests, that Garbhagriha is the embryo chamber, and it is the chamber of the new birth. So it is advised to the devotees that whenever they are entering inside the temple, they must go with the pure mind and they must be totally devoted to the God. And that's how, when they are totally devoted to the God, they enter with the pure mind and the soul inside the Garbhagriha. Their new birth happens. That's how many ways we call that new beginning has been made after entering into the Garbhagriha. The often repeated question in the UPSC is based on the 12 Shiva Jyotirlingas of India. First of all, understand that what is the concept of the Shiva Jyotirlinga. It is believed that Lord Shiva manifested himself in the form of an endless light column on the 12 places in the Indian subcontinent. And it is believed that Lord Shiva resides at these 12 places, and these are one of the highly functional and highly sanctified areas in Hinduism. So where are these 12 Shiva Jyotirlinga? So the first Jyotirlinga is the Somnath of Gujarat, and apart from it there is one more Shiva Jyotirlinga in Gujarat, which is Nageshwar. In Maharashtra there are Trimbakeshwar, Bhimsankar and Girishneshwar. So 3 Shiva Jyotirlingas in Maharashtra. Then moving on to southern India, Mallikarjun is the Shiva Jyotirlinga in Andhra, and Sri Rameshwaram is the Shiva Jyotirlinga in Tamil Nadu. Coming to the eastern India, in Jharkhand, Vaidyanath of the Devghar is another Shiva Jyotirlinga. And moving on to Madhya Pradesh. So in Madhya Pradesh there are 2 Shiva Jyotirlinga, one is the Omkareshwar and another is the Mahakaleshwar of Ujjain. Then another Shiva Jyotirlinga is in UP, which is Kashi Vishwanath of Varanasi. And last but not the least, very important Shiva Jyotirlinga is the Kedarnath in Uttarakhand. Another very important concept to be noted down is the concept of the Char Dham. Please don't be confused that Char Dham is associated with many deities. Char Dham is only associated with the Lord Vishnu. So what are these 4 places? So these 4 places are Jagannath Puri, Badrinath, Dwarka and Rameshwaram. Let's understand the concept of the Char Dham. Dwarka is the place where Lord Vishnu is the Raja. Badrinath is the place where Lord gets into his slumber, or it is his sleeping dham in Uttarakhand. And the 4th one is Jagannath Puri Peetham, which is in the Puri area of the Odisha. During the inauguration of the new parliament, a sceptre which was in the news, which was in the vogue, was the Sengol. So what is Sengol and what is the tradition of the Sengol? So Sengol actually represented the transfer of power from one to another, and historically for the first time Sengol was given to Jawaharlal Nehru on 14th of August 1947, and it was given to him by Tamil Adhinams, and it was symbol of the transfer of power from British authority to the newly created Indian government in the newly independent India. So similarly, when the new parliament was inaugurated by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, so Sengol was given to him by the Tamil Adhinams, and Sengol is derived from the Tamil word Semmai, which means righteousness. So Sengol is the symbol of the righteousness, though it has some religious connotations, but then it is actual symbol of the righteousness. Coming to the next important topic, which I believe is important for this year. So you all must be aware about the 8 classical forms of India and Chau, the 9th one, which is still pending. But there is one more dance form which is from Andhra, and it is also waiting for the classical recognition. So the name of the dance form is Andhra Natyam, and it is believed to be more than 2000 years old. So interesting fact about the Andhra Natyam, that it is not only associated with the temple tradition of the Andhra, but also it is associated with the Buddhist armas. In the centers of the Amaravati and the Nagarjuna Konda, this dance form was performed, and in fact we have evidences of the sculptures associated with the Andhra Natyam. So another interesting feature of the Andhra Natyam, that it respects both Telugu and Sanskrit tradition. So hopefully that this dance form may get the classical dance recognition in the near future, because it fulfills all the criteria of the classical dance. It's only pending for the recognition by the Sangeet Natak Academy. From last few years, there hasn't been question from the Indo-Islamic architecture, which means that it is an important topic for this year. So let's revise the features of the Indo-Islamic architecture. It is also called as the arcade architecture, because the arch and dome method of the construction was followed in this particular style of the architecture. The beginning of this style of architecture happened after the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate in 1206. So what are the important features? So the important features are use of brick, limestone and mortar. Apart from it, domes were the central features of the architecture of the Indo-Islamic style. Moreover, domes were not unique to India, but it also existed in the ancient times. For example, it can be said that the domes of Indo-Islamic style may have had some inspiration from the Buddhist stupas. Moving ahead, the other interesting feature of the Indo-Islamic style is the decoration through geometrical designs, arabesque designs and paitra dura technique of decoration. Apart from it, they created intricate jalis or beautiful stone tracery work to further enhance the aesthetics and the beauty of the buildings. Another thing is to be noted down, that Indo-Islamic architecture avoided the presentation of the human forms on their building, as the human representation is avoided in Islam. Then another interesting aspect or unique or important aspect of the Indo-Islamic architecture is writing of the verses from the Holy Quran, the Hadith and the Sunnah on the walls of the shrines, mosque or religious buildings. In fact, one of the very unique and interesting fact is Taj Mahal has near about 1 kilometer of the calligraphy or the verses which are written from the Holy Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah. Another very interesting aspect of the Indo-Islamic style is the planting of the slain this weird scene. And he found the trainer of the elephants. He asked about it, that why the elephants are not breaking free. And the trainer said that when these elephants were much smaller and very young, they used to tie the front leg of the elephants with this small rope. At that point of time, it was strong enough to hold the elephants. But then, when the elephants grew up, they were conditioned to believe that they cannot break free this rope, and they still believe that it will be holding them. So, they don't understand their potential, but they are conditioned to believe that this is what is holding them. So, the moral of the story, no matter what, how much world tries to hold you back, keep the belief that what you want to achieve in life is possible, and don't hold on to the failures of your life. Failures of your life are just a lesson to understand that what you must not repeat, and you must look on to what you can do.
Which was named Bande Mataram Sampradaya. And Bande Mataram Sampradaya, on every Sunday, they were going ahead with the Prabhat fairies, singing the Vande Mataram song. And apart from it, they were getting some voluntary contribution from the people for the motherland. So very often, Rabindranath Tagore also joined these Prabhat fairies, and he also sang Vande Mataram song. In August 1906, Vande Mataram magazine was released, and Bipin Chandra Pal was the initial editor of this magazine. Later on, Aurobindo Ghosh joined as joint editor, and in fact, he became the most important figure of the Vande Mataram magazine. So now by 1906, it has become a very popular song, a song related to the motherland and the religious passion, and evoking the feelings of the people towards India's independence and British treatment of India on the communal lines. So looking at the popularity of this song, British authority were alarmed, and they started imposing many curbs on the singing of the Vande Mataram song. For example, students were not allowed to sing or chant Vande Mataram. In one such instance, in 1906 itself, in Rangpur, 200 students were fined 5 rupees for chanting Vande Mataram song. Similarly, when Tilak was deported to Mandale jail in 1908, the last thing which was on his lips was Vande Mataram. So Vande Mataram, whenever it was chanted, whenever it was invoked, it attracted heavy British traction. Not only this, that there are many other things associated with the Vande Mataram song which are unique and which makes it very important. For example, in 1906 session of the Congress, it was adopted by Congress that in all India conferences, this would be the song which will be sung at the very first instance. Similarly, for the very first time in a Congress session, Vande Mataram song was sung in 1896 by none other than Rabindranath Tagore. There was very high impact of Vande Mataram song on revolutionaries also. For example, when in 1907, Madam Bhikhaji Kama, she came up with the first tricolor flag of India, in the middle strip of her flag, Vande Mataram was written. Similarly, in 1909, when Madan Lal Dhingra, he was prosecuted for killing Curzon Wiley in London. So while going to jail, while going to that gallows, his last words were Vande Mataram. Similarly, the Indian patriots in Paris in 1909 itself, they published Vande Mataram magazine from Geneva. And similarly, in 1912, when Gopal Krishna Gokhale visited South Africa, so he was welcomed by the Indian patriots with the cries of the Vande Mataram. After India's independence, this song was so important that on 24th of January 1950, the first president of India, Rajendra Prasad, asked to assembly that Vande Mataram be recognized to the equal status like the Janagada Mana. And it has played a very vital role during the Indian freedom struggle. Recently, Government of India announced that there will be celebration of 150 years of the Vande Mataram composition, and the celebration was conducted in 4 phases. So remember, Vande Mataram related important concepts. If you get one, maybe you will be lucky. One very important theme from modern Indian history is acts. And acts from 1773 to 1935 is very important. In previous videos of Culture Quantum last year and last to last year, we have covered all the acts, but the 3 acts which I believe that they are very important for this year paper is Government of India Act or Model Minto Reforms of 1909 and Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919, and so as the Government of India Act 1935. So you can expect questions from either of these 3 acts, because in previous years they haven't asked questions from these acts, but instead they have asked the questions from the acts which were before 1900. So let's start with the very first act, which is Model Minto Reforms of 1909, which is also called as Indian Councils Act of 1909. what is the background of this 1909 Act? Remember that when Congress was founded, so Congress adopted a moderate politics. And in the moderate politics, they have not gone beyond asking for the political reforms. In fact, even the self-rule was not demanded in the beginning. But after the partition of Bengal, Indian leaders, particularly the moderate leaders also and the extremist leaders of the Congress, they were of the view that self-rule is something that we must demand from the British authority. So now onwards, Indian National Congress is creating an environment of demanding the self-rule. And in this regard, in 1906, Gopalakrishna Gokhale, he met the Secretary of State Morley to discuss about that why the self-government is very important. Similarly, in 1906, during the similar deputation, Aga Khan met then Viceroy Minto and he demanded separate electorate for the Muslim masses. After listening to both the parties, that is Congress and so as the Muslim demand, some of the demands were accommodated in the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909 or Indian Councils Act of 1909. So let's see what were the important provisions of the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909. The very first important provision of 1909 is introduction of the indirect election for non-official members. Non-official members were the Indians, and in a way it allowed Indian participation in the legislative process. The second important provision of this act is expansion of the Indian members in the councils. So in both central and provincial legislative council, numbers of the Indians increased, that is non-official members increased, but it retained official majority in the central legislative council, but in provincial legislative councils, Indians were given majority. The third important provision of this act is central legislative council related things. There were total 69 members, and out of the 69 members, 27 members were non-official elected members and 5 non-official nominated members were there. Apart from it, remaining were the official majority and official members, that is the British people in the Central Legislative Council. Another very important provision of this act was introduction of the separate electorate for the Muslim masses. And the separate electorate, not only it gave greater representation to the Muslim masses, but at the same point of time, the income qualification criteria of the Muslim masses was kept at very low level. Next important provision of this act was the legislature powers. So the legislature powers increased. Now the legislature can pass a resolution. They can vote on certain budget items and they can also ask supplementary questions. But it is to be noted that voting on the budget items, it was not on the complete budget items, but separate budget items, which are less in number and not so important as compared to the ones which are not available for the voting process. The last important provision of the 1909 is the inclusion of an Indian member in Viceroy Executive Council. And the first Indian member in the Viceroy Executive Council was Satyendra Prasad Sinha. He was Advocate General of Bengal when he was made the member of the Viceroy Executive Council. And in fact, on the later dates, he also performed a very vital role in the War Imperial Council during the World War I. After the passing of the Morley-Minto reforms, there were many discussions and debates regarding that what has been given, what not been given. But one very important discussion was separate electorate. So there was a sharp reaction from the side of the Congress that separate electorate is an attempt to divide the Indian society. But let me tell you one very important fact related to it. When the discussion on the separate electorate was happening between Morley, who was Secretary of State, and Minto, who was the then Viceroy of India, so Morley went on to say to Minto that you're sowing a dragon's teeth and the harvest would be bitter. And in reality, in the later date, it happened so. Because building on the separate electorate thing, Muslim League went on to demand Pakistan. So next important act is Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919, and it is also called as Indian Councils Act of 1919. Now, the backdrop of this 1919 reform is the increasing realization in the British circle that Indian association in branch of administration is very required, and with including Indians in the process of the administration, they can rule for a longer period. So there was a statement of the Secretary of State Montagu in 1917 August month that The policy of His Majesty government is increasing association of Indians in every branch of administration and gradual development of self-governing institutions in India so as grant of responsible government in India under the British Empire. So in a way, this particular statement of Montagu says that self-government demand by the Indians is not a seditious activity. More Indians would be included in the branch of administration. And at the same point of time, there are the hidden words in the statement of Montagu that it is the only British government which will decide that when these reforms would be given and what would be the nature of the reforms, and India would always remain a colony of the Britain. But moving ahead in this part, when we look at the different provisions of the Montagu-Chelmsford reform, one more question which can be asked in the prelims examination is that some of the committees which played a very vital role in the creation of the provisions of the 1919 reform. So what are the name of these committees? There were two committees. One was the Feetham Committee and another was the Southborough Franchise Committee. So remember, if at all you get a question that Feetham Committee and Southborough Franchise Committee was associated with which act, so it is the Government of India Act 1919, or you can say Indian Councils Act 1919 or Montagu-Chelmsford Reforms of 1919. So let's look at the important provisions of 1919 Act. Very first is that it replaced the single legislative council with the two house concept, that is upper house, Council of State, and the lower house, that is Legislative Assembly. Moreover, direct concept of the election was starting from this particular act, and this direct election, though it was not universal adult franchise, but limited franchise was there, and limited franchise was based on the property of the people, the taxes, and so as the education status of the people. So in both the houses, upper house also and in the lower house also, people can vote, but remember that it was a limited franchise, though direct election but limited franchise. Second very important provision of this act was introduction of the diarchy in the provinces, which means the rule of two. And this rule of two means that there are two types of the subjects, that is transferred subject and reserved subject. Reserved subjects were managed by governor and his executive council, and it had some of the most important themes like finances, like revenue, like irrigation, and law and order administration. So as the Department of Justice was also under the reserved subjects. On the other hand, transferred subjects were managed by the popular ministers, and moreover, this transferred subject included the lesser important themes like agriculture, health, education, and industry, and the local government. So the popular minister faced problem in agriculture sector basically because irrigation was not in the transferred but it was in the reserved subject. So at the end of the day, though there has been some sort of relegation of authority to the popular ministers, but not the so important authority. Another very important provision of this act was appointment of the High Commissioner of India in London, and this High Commissioner was responsible for Indian trade in the other parts of the world. Then another very important provision that in 1926, this act led to the establishment of Central Public Service Commission, and Central Public Service Commission was responsible for the recruitment of the civil servants in India. Then apart from it, another very important provision of this act is that provincial budget was now to be separated from the central budget, and provincial government were responsible for making their own budget. This act also called for establishment of statutory commission after every 10th year to look into the reports of the functioning of the previous act. But in this case, 1919 and expiry will come in 1929, but Simon Commission, which was Indian Statutory Commission, was appointed in 1927 for looking into the reports of the 1919 Act. In 1909, Muslim community was given separate electorate, and in 1919, it was further extended to the Sikh community, to the Anglo-Indian community, and so as the Indian Christians. So communal electorate concept was further elaborated, and in future time also, you will see that in 1932, the communal electorate was further extended to the depressed classes in the Hindu society. Government of India Act 1935 is also very important for this year prelims. You can expect at least one question from this section. In the making of Government of India Act, what has gone into its creation? So basically, it is white papers, So as reports of Joint Select Committee and also all the discussions and debates which were there in 3 roundtable conferences, Simon Commission recommendations and recommendations of the Secretary of State Samuel Ho. So let's look at what are the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935. So the very first important provision of the Government of India Act 1935 that it aimed for creation of All India Federation. Creation of federation was conditional. And what was the condition? Condition was that half the princely states must give their consent to joint federation. And there was a sub-condition also that even if the half princely states are joining, but their aggregate population must also be more than half the entire population of the princely states. So this provision was never fulfilled and half of the princely states never gave their consent to join the federation. As such, All India Federation never became operational and Government of India, central government, was run according to the Act of 1919 till 1946. Then coming to the next provision, diarchy was removed from the provinces and provinces were given provincial autonomy. So meaning that in the provinces, if the local governments are created, they will be having more decision-making power, more autonomy. Then apart from it, what about the central government? So in the central government, diarchy was introduced, which means the concept of transferred and reserved subject. Reserved subjects were managed by Governor General and his Executive Council, and transferred subjects were managed by Governor General and his Legislative Council. Apart from it, it also created 3 lists of legislation, that is federal, concurrent and provincial. Then there are many other important provisions associated with it. For example, it led to the establishment of the Federal Public Service Commission, Provincial Public Service Commission, Joint Public Service Commission. Then apart from it, it also led to the establishment of Federal Railway Authority to manage the administration of Indian Railways. So as it also led to the establishment of Federal Bank of India, which is now known as the Reserve Bank of India, related to the currency and the liquidity status in the country. Then apart from it, it also led to the establishment of Federal Court of India, which became operational in 1937. There were some other provisions which are also important in 1935, for example, that it paved the way for the separation of Burma from India. And moreover, it also led to the appointment of Auditor General of India. Another very important theme for this year paper is civil disobedience movement. In last year paper, UPSC has asked questions related to non-cooperation. In fact, good number of the questions were related to non-cooperation. So better be prepared civil disobedience movement this time. And I will not teach you the entire civil disobedience, you must have studied, but then there are few important things which I want to mention over here, that there were many different modes of mobilization during civil disobedience movement. And in these modes of mobilization, entire society was involved, including children's and women's also. So for example, Manjari Sena was created for the mobilization of the women, and the harbingers of the Manjari Sena were the young women participants of the CDM. Then apart from it, Vanar Sena was created. In Vanar Senas, it is inspired from the Lord Hanuman's army, and young boys were the part of the Vanar Sena, and they were distributing leaflets related to the civil disobedience movement in different towns and villages. Apart from it, secret patrikas were also released and distributed among people, and apart from it, not just the secret patrikas, but lantern shows were also created. So lantern shows were also created whereby the pictures of the Indian freedom struggle was shown to the people in different areas, towns and villages, and it was evoking their emotions to bring greater participation in the civil disobedience movement. Though you must have studied about the important leaders of the CDM and those important leaders who were involved in some of the very famous salt satyagrahas. But there are other leaders also who needs attention. Very important in Andhra Pradesh is Kotapalli Satyagraha, which was organized by K. Lingam Raju. Then in Odisha, Inchudi Satyagraha was organized by H.K. Mahatab. And similarly, in Jharkhand, the Satyagraha was organized by Bonga Maji and Somra Maji. in Maharashtra, Solapur Satyagraha was launched under the leadership of Anna Sahib Bhopatkar. Similarly, in Bihar, Acharya Kripalani, he launched No Chaukidari text under the Satyagraha of the Gandhi during CDM. And apart from it, in Gujarat, the Satyagraha was the responsibility of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. You must also prepare Quit India Movement very well. I'm expecting a question this year from Quit India Movement. So here also, I'm not going to teach you everything. I'm just pointing that what is important, and you might get questions from this area. So if you have paucity of time and if you're not able to revise the entire portion, at least these portion must be revised. So let me tell you something important related to Quit India Movement. I know that you are aware about the many things, but one question which has been repeatedly asked from the Quit India Movement, that which of the following statements are correct, and one of the statement is it was a leaderless movement. So when you get this option, it was a leaderless movement, it is perfectly correct, and 3 times UPSC has asked this question in last 15 years. Moving ahead, when we look at the Gandhi's attitude at the time of the Quit India Movement. In fact, Gandhi initially, when the World War II started, he was not in the favor of the mass movement. And in fact, from 1939 to 1942, Congress was not involved in a very big mass movement. In fact, public was anxious that why Congress is not taking any decision in this regard. And in 1942, Gandhi became very assertive and he became impatient and he became restless also. The reason is there was failure of the Cripps mission. And also the promises which were given by the British authority, none of them were fulfilled. So looking at the state at this time, Japan is coming closer to the Indian borders and there was restlessness in entire India. So Gandhi made a statement to the British authority that leave India to anarchy, leave it to the God, I would risk it. So these words of the Gandhi, it was expressed to his American friend Louis Fisher. And Louis Fisher was the one who later on went on to write the Gandhi's biography, and a movie was made on Gandhi's biography in the Western world on the basis of the recordings of the Louis Fisher. Then there are the other details associated with the Quit India Movement. For example, that 8th of August Govalia tank announcement was made. I hope you're aware about it. And 9th of August early morning, entire top leadership of the Congress was arrested in a single sweep, and movement was inaugurated by a young leader, Aruna Asaf Ali, who chaired the committee in the morning 9th of August at Govalia Tank, and she unfurled the Indian flag to start the movement. So these you might be knowing. Another important part associated with the Quit India Movement, that you equally prepare parallel governments which are the part of the Quit India Movement, and so as the underground activities. Today we are going to discuss the background of the acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. You can expect a question from this series, and now we are going to discuss the background of the acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. So let's start with the background of the Model Minto reforms of 1909. It is named after Secretary of State Morley and Viceroy of India Minto. The very first background information is basically the visit of the Prince of Wales to India, who was there in India in between November 1905 to March 1906. And Prince of Wales, later he went on to become King George V. So while he was returning back from India, he had a suggestion to Morley. He said that the watchword for British rule in India should be sympathy. The second important background information related to Model Minto reforms is basically the budget speech of Gopalakrishna Gokhale in March 1906. And in this historic speech, he has appealed to the British authority that conciliation with the British authority can only be possible when educated Indians are getting associated more and more with the administration of their country. Third important factor in Model Minto reforms is the constitution of the A.T. Arundale Committee. This committee submitted its report in October 1906, and it also talked about what would be the future reforms. Moreover, it wanted the opinion of the local governments and so as the local representatives. So by the end of 1906, the report of the committee was sent to all the local governments for their opinion. Another very important factor behind the proposed reforms in 1909 was the Aligarh movement initiated by Sir Syed Ahmed Khan. And this movement gradually alienated Hindus from the Muslims, particularly in the political field. Moreover,
There was anti-Hindu feeling when the Indian National Congress was getting created by the Aligarh movement leaders. Moreover, another thing that it is believed that this mechanization was possible due to the British of 1919. Montagu was the Secretary of State and Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. And the background of this reform can be traced back to Lucknow Pact of 1916. In the Lucknow Pact of 1916, both Indian National Congress and Muslim League came together, and moreover, they have set aside their differences. They also supported each other's demands and claims, and then both of them demanded self-rule for India. This created some sort of pressure on the British authority when the two communities are coming together. The second very important reason behind the reforms of 1919 is Home Rule movement, which started in 1916 and continued very well till 1918. So Home Rule movement stirred the masses, and moreover, it created some sort of nervousness in the British officials in India. So during the Home Rule movement, when the masses were stirred, British authority tried repressive measures. They created a false case against Tilak, but this time Tilak was successfully defended by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Then they arrested Mrs. Annie Besant, Arundale, and so as Wadia. But after the arrest of Mrs. Annie Besant, there was huge uproar all over India, and moreover, masses were turning little violent at this point of time. Looking at the reaction of the Indians, Secretary of State Montagu made a statement, a historic statement somehow related to the Indian mythology, that Shiva cut his wife into 52 pieces only to discover that he had 52 wives. This is what happens to Government of India when it interns Mrs. Annie Besant. So at the height of Home Rule movement, Mrs. Annie Besant was released, and moreover, British officials were nervous enough to appeal to the British authority in Britain that sent the reforms at an early date in India. In 1916 and 1917, Secretary of State was Austen Chamberlain, and he happened to be the first person who talked about realization of the self-government in India. So Austen Chamberlain, he made a statement. The statement was that it is not merely enough to increase the number of Indians in councils and legislatures. In fact, more responsibility must be vested in those Indians who are the part of these bodies. He further went on to say that the goal of the British government must be self-realization. He suggested to the British government that they must declare the goal in India must be development of self-governing institutions in the future course of time. And obviously, it is the British government which can decide that what timeline it must be giving, but it must be declared for the Indians. When Austen Chamberlain was Secretary of State of India, that was the time when Edwin Montagu was Under Secretary of Government of India. He also seconded the opinion of Chamberlain, and he also went on to say that the Government of India is too wooden, too iron, too inelastic, too antediluvian to be of any use for the modern purposes that we have in view. Another very important background info related to Montagu-Chelmsford reform is the post-World War I scenario. During the World War I, that is from 1914 to 1918, large number of Indians supported British effort during World War I, and they had an expectation that after the war is over, substantial greater political autonomy would be given to the Indians. So, British cannot deny the fact that Indians have not supported them, and to seek their further association, they have to give in something to Indians. On this note, Under Secretary of India, Edwin Montagu made a statement: if you want to use the loyalty of Indians, you must give them higher opportunity to controlling their own destinies. And it created a great excitement in India. The political leadership of India welcomed the statement of Edwin Montagu, and so was the excitement that British appointed Edwin Montagu as the Secretary of State of India in July 1917. So after his appointment as the Secretary of State of India, Edwin Montagu made a historic statement on 20th of August 1917, and moreover, this statement is also called as August Offer of the Montagu. So what he exactly said: the policy of His Majesty Government in India, with which the Government of India is in complete accord, is that increasing association of Indians in each and every branch of administration and gradual development of self-governing institution with progressive realization of the responsible government of India as an integral part of the British Empire. So now you studied the background of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. I would request you go through the last year video also and see that what were the provisions of the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. As you know that no matter how difficult or easy the UPSC paper is, you will be getting a question from the acts, and that is from 1773 to 1935. So please add those portions to these background info also. Third and the most important act, as far as the foundational principles of the self-governing institutions in India is concerned, is the Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935 also served as a foundational principle to guide the writing of the Indian Constitution from 1946. So let's look at the background of the Government of India Act 1935. The very first thing goes back to the constitution of the Simon Commission. So Simon Commission was constituted on the recommendation of Alexander Muddiman Committee, which was constituted in 1924. And the Alexander Muddiman Committee recommended the creation of Indian Statutory Commission, which came to be known as the Simon Commission, to review the provisions of 1919 Act and further recommend the new constitutional measures. But there was one thing about Simon Commission which irked all the Indian nationalists. That is, not even a single Indian, the most moderate, the most liberal, was the part of a commission which was going to decide the constitutional fate of India. Despite the appeals from the Indian nationalist side, not even a single Indian was accommodated when the commission was in India. So commission headed for the discussions with the provincial governments and the important leaders of India. But on the other hand, all the national parties of India, they initiated Simon boycott. So after the consultations were over, what were the recommendations of the Simon Commission? And you must remember the recommendation of the Simon Commission. So the recommendation of the Simon Commission was, it wanted end of the diarchy from the provinces. Then apart from it, it also suggested that there must be separation of Burma from the Indian government. Then it also made a case for the protection of the minority rights. And very important that it suggested that there must be continuation of the communal electorate to safeguard the rights of the minorities in India. And in fact, these recommendations were accepted in the Government of India Act 1935 with a thumping majority. The second important background info related to 1935 Act is basically the conduct of the 3 roundtable conferences. And these 3 roundtable conferences were conducted because of the demand from the Indian side to give more autonomy to the Indian leaders in the governance of their country. So 3 roundtable conferences were conducted in Britain, and in all these 3 roundtable conferences, all the major parties of India, including Indian National Congress and the representatives of the different communities, were invited. So Congress participated in just 2nd roundtable conference. It did not participate in the 1st and the 3rd roundtable conference. So in the roundtable conference, series of negotiations, series of discussions happened, and after that, whatever the recommendations of the 3 roundtable conference, it got reflected in the Government of India Act 1935. The third important juncture in the realization of the 1935 Act was announcement of British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, that is Communal Award, in 1932. This Communal owned Banaras Hindu University in 1916, which went on to become the biggest residential campus university in Asia. So apart from it, what were the literary contributions of the Madan Mohan Malviya ji? That is something which is important for this year exam. So one contribution of Madan Mohan Malviya ji was writing the Hindi rendition of the epic written by Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas. Then moreover, he also wrote a very famous article, Hindu-Muslim Unity, the Need of the Hour. And with this article, he has appealed for the communal harmony. Apart from it, he has also edited the newspapers like Hindustan and Abhyuday. Two more literature authored by Madan Mohan Malviya ji is Rashtriya Shiksha and Bharat Darshan, in which he is emphasizing on the education as the need of the hour for the development of India, and so as his love for India and India's culture in Bharat Darshan. Later on, in 2014, Madan Mohan Malviya, posthumously he was awarded Bharat Ratna. Another very important personality from the freedom struggle phase of India is Tangaturi Prakasam Pantulu. He came to limelight during the Simon Commission's visit to India, and when the Simon boycott was going on, when Simon Commission visited Andhra, he was the one who spearheaded the campaign of boycott against the Simon Commission. Moreover, he was threatened by the British authority that if he moves ahead, he will be shot dead. But he was not fearful about anything, and he moved ahead bare-chested, and he claimed that if they really want to kill, they can kill him. He earned the title of Andhra Kesari, or Lion of Andhra, and later on in 1953, he went on to become the first Chief Minister of Andhra. Slogans played a very vital role in galvanizing the masses during the mass movement. So one of the very famous slogan in 1920s was Inqilab Zindabad. And when we talk about Inqilab Zindabad, so the name which comes to the mind is Bhagat Singh. But in reality, this slogan, this very evocative slogan was written by Hazrat Mohani Sahab in 1921, and later on it was popularized by Bhagat Singh and his comrades. Another very important slogan which was popular during the national movement and 1920s itself, that is Simon Go Back. So Simon Go Back slogan was written by Yusuf Meher Ali, and not only this, but it was Yusuf Meher Ali who also wrote the slogan or created the slogan Quit India. So please remember that these two slogans, and moreover who were the writers of these slogans. And in this episode I'm going to cover all the important acts starting from 1773 till 1935. As you know, every year there are questions from this particular section, and it is one of the very important topic from the modern Indian history. So let's start this episode from the background of the administration of the British East India Company in India. Company in India was managed by 24 Court of Directors, and these 24 Court of Directors were highest decision making body. They were appointed by the shareholders of the company, and they were also called as Court of Proprietors. Day-to-day affair of the company was managed by different committees created from these 24 Court of Directors. In India, there were 3 presidencies of the company, and these were Bengal, Bombay and Madras. In each of the presidency, there was a president and there was a governor in council. Each and every decision of the company was taken with the majority vote of the council. So this is what was the structure before 1773. In 1773, the situation arose whereby there was a need of the regulation of the affairs of the company. So what was the background of the Regulating Act of the 1773? By 1773, Bengal has come under the control of the British East India Company. And after the Treaty of Allahabad, 1765, dual system of administration was implemented in the Bengal, whereby the financial administration or revenue administration, that is Diwani function, was in the hands of the British East India Company, and the Nizamat function or civil administration was in the hands of the Bengal Nawab, who was controlled by the British East India Company. So it was a dual system of government, but in reality it was a dual system of operation of the people of Bengal. And moreover, there were many other issues. There was a severe famine of 1770, and people were reeling under the pressure of the severe famine of the 1770, which swiped near about 1/3 population of the Bengal. Apart from it, there were charges against the company officials that they have amassed so much of corrupt wealth that they can be better called as the Nawabs of London. And in fact, it was very much verified by a secret committee which was appointed by the British Parliament that corruption was very high in the company, and one of the reasons was the private trade. At this point of time, the British Parliament and the British Crown did not want it to be mute spectator when the people of Bengal and the people of India were reeling under pressure, and they wanted to have a say directly appointed by the British Crown. Each and every decision in the council was taken with the majority vote. So effectively there were 5 members, 1 Governor General and 4 other executive members of the council. Number 3, it banned private trade, and company officials were not allowed to indulge in any private trade. Number 4, company officials were asked to provide all the details related to the wealth that they have acquired in India, and this detailed statement must be submitted to the British Parliament. Number 5, the Act laid the foundation of the Supreme Court at Calcutta with Eliza Impe as the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and 3 other judges. Moving ahead with the defects of the Regulating Act of the 1773. Primarily there were 3 defects. Number 1, Governor General was rendered powerless in his council as all the 4 executive members often outvoted him and he was not able to take any decision. Number 2, the provisions related to the Supreme Court were quite vague and not clearly defined. In fact, there was often a clash between the judicial authority of Governor General and so as Supreme Court. And number 3, despite Bombay and Madras being subservient, they acted on their discretion and they often did not pay any heed to the instructions or the decisions of the Warren Hastings or Governor of the Bengal. So looking at the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, in 1781 the Amendment Act was passed and the Amendment Act of 1781 addressed one problem, that is the clear demarcation of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and British East India Company. Accordingly, number 2nd provision, Board of Control was created, which was the representative of the British Crown and it was having 6 members. Board of Control was headed by the Secretary of State, and Secretary of State later on he will become an important position after 1858. But then please remember that Secretary of State was the President of the Board of Control from 1784 itself. And who is Secretary of State? He is one of the Cabinet Minister in the British Parliament. Number 3, to give more powers and to give more importance to Governor General, it was decided that one executive member will be removed from his council so that if he gets the support of one member, so with the casting vote he can go ahead with his decision. So now effectively there are 4 members in the Governor General Executive Council, 1 Governor General and so as the 3 executive members. Number 4, the independent powers of the Bombay and Madras was taken away and now they were made completely subordinate to Bengal. So now they were completely subordinate to Bengal in the matters of war, revenue, legislation, everything. Earlier they were just subordinate, but it was not defined in what sense, but now in every sense they have been made subordinate in 1784. It's an important point to remember. Number 5, for the first time the company's position in India was called as British possession in India. And another provision of this particular act, we can say that number 6 provision was Pitt's India Act of 1784. It forbade company to interfere in the native affairs of India, but this was seldom observed. As far as the defects of the 1784 is concerned, it was also not able to achieve much success. The reason is the nebulous connection developed between the Board of Control and Court of Director, and the relationship was highly subjective. Moreover, still the corruption continued because there was no effective control and there was no effective mechanism at the place. Other than that, Governor General was still rendered powerless because once again the 3 executive members were ganging together and outvoting the Governor General Warren Hastings. The next important act was Charter Act of 1793. Charter Act of 1793 renewed the company's charter for next 20 years. That means that till 1813, the company's powers will be intact in India and their monopoly will be intact in India. What are the other provisions related to it? In 1785, new Governor General Cornwallis was appointed and he demanded overriding power in his council. Initially, he was given overriding power, but in 1786, with the special act of the Parliament, he was further given overriding power in his councils. Second important provision of this act is it allowed a company to increase its dividend by 10%. One of the very important provision of this act was redefining and reorganizing the courts in India. Earlier, there used to be the revenue courts which were called as the Mal Adalats, and now revenue administration was completely divorced from judiciary functions, and it also led to the disappearance of the Mal Adalats. Next important provision of the Charter Act of the 1793 is that it called for written laws in India, and it maintained that the rule of India or the governance of India must not be based on the personal rule of the rulers, but in fact written rules must be there or written laws must be there. It also said that all these laws and the written rules must be translated in Indian languages also, so that the people can know about their rights and immunities. Last but not the least, it also said that the salaries of the Governor General will not be paid from the British Exchequer, but it will be paid from the Indian revenues. The next important phase in the company's administration is the Charter Act of 1813. So we need to know a little bit of the background of the Charter Act of the 1813. There was a hell lot of pressure which was created by the British industrialist on the British Parliament to end the monopoly of the company. What was the reason? The reason was rise of Napoleon in France and in Europe, and Napoleon created continental system. Many of the European countries were allied with the continental system, and Napoleon barred any kind of trade with the Britain. So, in fact, Britain was at this point of time at the climax of the Industrial Revolution. There were so many manufactured goods to offer to the public, but then there was no market. So at this point of time, these British industrialists, they wanted access to the market of India and China, which was monopolized by the British East India Company. And it is also said that Adam Smith's theory of laissez-faire or free trade theory was also very popular at this point of time, and everybody created pressure citing the name of the Adam Smith laissez-faire. So Charter Act of 1813 was passed in the background of this particular continental system and the rise of Napoleon. Let's come to the provisions. Provision number 1 of this particular act. The company's charter was renewed for next 20 years, but then now it is ending the company's monopoly of trade in India. The company's monopoly of trade in India ended in many of the aspects, but company was able to retain its monopoly in the tea trade in India and also its monopoly with trade with China. Next important provision of this act was, this act allowed the Christian missionaries to go to India and promote Christianity and promote moral and religious education in India. The third important provision of this act was, this act allocated 1 lakh rupees from the Indian revenues for the promotion of education among the Indian subjects. But unfortunately, this money was not made available for many years due to the debate and discussion on mode of education. That is, mode of education must be vernacular or English medium. So it was finally solved in 1833 when William Bentinck was the Governor General of India. The next important provision of this act, that this act empowered local governments to impose taxes on the people, but it was subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Only those areas which were there in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, the local governments of these area only can impose the taxes on the people. Moving on to the most important Charter Act, that was the Charter Act of the 1833. It was also called as St. Helena Act. Let's look at the provisions of the Charter Act of the 1833. Very first, it completely ended the monopoly of the company, be it the tea trade in India, so as trade with China. So now company is no more having any monopoly in any part. Number 2, all the other companies from Britain, now they were allowed to operate in these all places, and this is the act which led to the legal colonization of India. Next important provision. In 1784 Act, 1 member was removed from the Governor General Council, but now in this act, once again a 4th member was added to the Governor General Council. It is to be noted that the 4th member was the legislative member and he was not the permanent member of the Executive Council. His work was only for the purpose of the legislation, that is rule making, and he was not entitled to vote. So effectively there are 3 executive members and 1 legislative member. And the first legislative member of the Governor General Council was Lord Macaulay. The next important provision of this act was establishment of the first Indian Law Commission. Lord Macaulay was the chairman of the first Indian Law Commission, and this commission was entitled to codify the Indian Penal Code and so as Civil Procedure Code and Criminal Procedure Code of India. And that's how these all act became a reality by 1860s. Section 87 of the Act provided for the education and the employment of Indians in the British services, and it also maintained that there be no discrimination on the basis of race, caste, religion, place of birth or descent. It was the first act which maintained that there would be free admission of Indians in the British administration, or in other words we can say that this was the first act which made a provision to freely admit Indians into the administration without any discrimination. Another provision of this act is that it recommended The Haileybury College in London must make the quota for the future civil servants from India, though it was not taken seriously, but the provision was mentioned in the 1833 Act. Now, coming to the most important part of the 1833 Act is Governor General of Bengal was now made Governor General of India, and Lord William Bentinck in 1833 became the first Governor General of India. He was the most powerful Governor General till this date. All the financial and political powers were vested in his hand, and moreover, he was entitled to repeal, amend, alter any law or regulation. The only condition was it must be approved by the Court of Directors who were acting under the Board of Control. So only the Court of Directors can disapprove his action, nobody else can disapprove his action. It is to be noted. The next important provision of this act, that this act called for the upliftment of the slaves in India. Another important provision of this act, that this act led to the split in the Bengal presidency and creation of the Agra from the Bengal presidency. Moving on to the next important provision of this act was, it was said that while drafting any law, the rights of the heads of the Indian families must be taken into the consideration, and also the rights related to the marriage or tradition, customs related to the marriage must also be respected while drafting the law. So moving on to the last Charter Act, that is the Charter Act of the 1853. Unlike the other Charter Acts, this Charter Act, though it renewed the company's charter, but it did not fix any timeline for the continuation of the company's administration. So it means that now it was very clear that very soon or any time soon, company can be asked to wind up its operation. Which kind of operation? So basically the administrative operations. Already they have winded up their commercial operations in 1833. Let's move to the next provision of this particular act. This particular act reduced the number of the Court of Directors from 24 to 18, and out of these 18 Court of Directors, 6 were to be appointed or nominated by the British Crown. Another very important provision of this act, or I would say it is the most important provision of this act, now the separation of the Legislative Council with the Executive Council. So now a separate Legislative Council, Governor General Legislative Council, was created with 6 new members. So it is clear indication of the separation of power. Next important provision of this act, out of the 6 new members who were to be the part of the Governor General Legislative Council, 4 were to be recommended by, or 4 were to be chosen by the local governments. Please don't get confused. Local government does not mean the Indian governments or the Indian princely state government. It is basically the local governments of Bombay, Madras, Calcutta and Agra. And moreover, it was also mentioned that those British who have at least completed 10 years in the services of the company, they will be entitled to be nominated in the council. One of the very important provision of this particular Charter Act of 1853 is that it called for entry of Indians in the covenanted civil services, and now it is going to throw open the civil services exam to the Indians. Now Indians would be the part of the civil services, but on the basis of the exam which is to be conducted by the British government. In this regard, to make the syllabus and further make recommendation related to the entry of Indians, once again Macaulay Committee was constituted in 1854. So accordingly, when the exams were thrown open to Indians and exam was conducted, so first Indian to clear this exam was Satyendranath Tagore, who was recommended in 1864. After 4 years of the Charter Act of the 1853, in 1857, the mighty revolt of 1857 happened, and it changed the entire scenario in India, which led to the transfer of power from British East India Company to the British Crown. So after the suppression of the revolt of 1857, in 1858, there was Queen Victoria's Declaration and also Government of India Act 1858. So let's look at the Queen Victoria's proclamation, what she promised to Indians in her proclamation of 1858. Queen Victoria's proclamation was read out by Governor General Canning at a darbar held at Allahabad. And in this particular proclamation, Queen disclaimed any intention of conquest in India, and she also assured that the rights of the Indian princely states would be respected. She also assured Indians that the traditions, customs, usages, rights and beliefs of the Indians would be respected. It also maintained that the British rule will be based on the justice and benevolence, and it further said that Indians would be incorporated into the rule making and so as in the administration without any discrimination on the basis of the caste, creed, religion and place of birth. So Queen Victoria's proclamation came along with the Government of India Act 1858, and some quick provisions of the Government of India Act 1858 are as follows. So very first, now the designation of the Governor General also became the Viceroy of India. Many of you must be confused that what is the difference between Governor General of India and Viceroy of India. The single person was Governor General also and the Viceroy also. So basically, as Viceroy, he is the representative of the British Crown, and as Governor General, he is the administrative head of India. So single person acted in both the capacities. And the first Governor General and the Viceroy was obviously Viceroy Canning or Governor General Canning. Moving on to the next important provision of this particular act. Secretary of State, who was the cabinet minister and who also used to be the president of the Board of Control, now he was made responsible for the Government of India. And moreover, to assist Secretary of State, a 15-member Council of India was created, and this is the Council of India which will be further expanded, and it will lead to the creation of the many legislative assemblies in India, be it the Central Legislative Assembly or the Provincial Legislative Assembly. And last but not the least, this is the act which transferred the power from British East India Company to the British Crown, and now the subjects of India would be under the rule of the Crown of the Britain. Since the Government of India Act 1858 came very quickly, so the council provisions were not very elaborated. So there was need of elaborative council provisions. So accordingly, the first Council Act came in 1861. Let's look at the provision of this particular act. Now, it was realized by the British government and the British Crown that they cannot neglect the Indians, and Indians must be incorporated into the rule-making process. So this act led to the inclusion of Indians as non-official members in the Central Legislative Council, which is also called as Imperial Legislative Council. You might be thinking that what is the Central Legislative Council? It is basically the 15-member council which was created earlier, and now it will be having more members. So what is non-official and official? Official members would be the British and non-official member would be the Indians. So now Indians are incorporated into the councils as non-official members. So initially there were 3 Indian members who were included in the Governor General's Council as non-official member. And who were they? So they were Raja of Banaras, Raja of Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. And their appointment was for 2 years, and then after 2 years, once again their fate would be decided. Another very important provision of this act, that Governor General or Viceroy was now entitled to go ahead with the portfolio system. And what is portfolio system? Basically creation of the different departments like Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Health, etc. Another very important provision is Governor General can veto the advice or aid of his members in the council, and this has to be done only on the emergency matters. Apart from it, Governor General was also entitled to issue ordinances in the emergency situations. And if a question is asked that from where we can trace the beginning of the ordinances, so that would be the Indian Councils Act of 1861. Council Act of 1861 also called for establishment of the provincial legislative councils, and accordingly the provincial legislative councils were created in Bengal, Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, and by the time of the 1892 it was also created in Awadh. So moving on to the Indian Councils Act of 1892. Indian Councils Act of 1892 called for increment in the number of the non-official members, or basically increment in the numbers of the Indians in the legislative councils. So by this point of time, out of the 24 members of the provincial council, only 5 were Indians. Though it is an increment, but then it is not a very great increment in the number of the Indians in the councils. Apart from it, the Indian members of the provincial and the central councils, they were allowed to ask questions on the budget, but it is to be noted that they will have to give a 6-day notice prior to it. Another very important thing is to be noted that Indian members were not allowed to ask supplementary question. And another important provision of this act, that some of these Indians who were the part of the councils, their nomination method was kind of an indirect election method. But it is to be noted, nowhere in the act the word election was mentioned. So now moving on to the 20th century and the acts which were there in the initial decades of the 20th century till the independence of India. So the very first one, Indian Councils Act of 1909, which is also called as Morley Minto Reforms. Morley Minto Reform signifies the names of the Morley and Minto. Minto was the Viceroy of India and Morley was the Secretary of India. So let's look at the important provisions of this act. This act further increased the number of the Indians in the central and the provincial legislative councils. Another very important provision related to the Indian members is some of the members who were nominated in the provincial councils, their nomination was happening through the electoral college, and this electoral college was having members like the privileged class of India, like the rich traders, rich merchants, business class, group of teachers, professors, etc. So basically it was an income based electoral college. The Indian members of the provincial and the central council, now they were given more powers related to the discussion on budget. Now the Indian members were allowed to discuss budget and also vote on the separate budget items. Apart from it, they were also allowed to ask the supplementary questions. The most discriminatory and the most cancerous provision of this particular act was the introduction of the separate electorate or the communal electorate. So now in this act, the Muslim community was given separate electorate, which means that if in a constituency, if election has to happen, so the candidates would be Muslims and the voters would be Muslims, no matter how many Indians, no matter how many Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists or other religious people are there, but they will not be entitled to vote. So it is believed that this is the provision which led to the communal disharmony in India, and this is the provision which led to the partition tendency in the Indian politics. Another very important provision of this act, that one Indian member was to be added to the Viceroy Executive Council, and the first Indian member added to the Viceroy Executive Council was Satyendra Prasad Sinha. Coming on to the next important act, that is Government of India Act 1919, and it is also called as Montagu-Chelmsford Reform, whereby the Chelmsford was the Governor General of India or Viceroy of India and Montagu was the Secretary of India. So what are the important provisions of this particular act? It increased the number of the Indians in the central and provincial legislative councils, but then it also introduced diarchy in the provinces. So what is diarchy? Diarchy means rule of two. And in the provincial governments or in the provinces, two authorities were created. One is the popular minister and another is the Governor General with his executive council. Accordingly, it divided the subjects into two categories, that is reserved subjects and transferred subjects. Reserved subjects were managed by the governor through his executive councillors, and the transferred subjects were under the realm of the popular ministers. So reserved subjects included some of the important subjects like finance, land revenue, irrigation and law and order. On the other hand, the transferred subjects were like health, education, agriculture, local governments, etc. Moving on to the next important provision of this particular act is, if there is any failure of the constitutional machinery in the state, so in this particular situation, governor with his executive council will be managing the affairs of the state, or basically he will also be managing the reserved, and basically he will also be managing the transferred subjects. The next important provision of this particular act was introduction of the bicameral legislation at the center. So in the bicameral legislation, the upper house was created for the 3 years, and moreover there were total 145 members in the upper house. Out of them 41 were nominated and rest of them, that is 104, were elected. On the other hand, the upper house, the Council of State, had 60 members. Another very important provision of this, or basically the dividing provision of this act, which is the continuation of the divide and policy rule from the 1909, is the extension of the separate electorate for the Anglo-Indian community, Indian Christian community, and so as the Sikh community. The next important provision of this act was basically, it called for giving voting rights to the women, but it was in the realm of the provincial governments to decide when, how and where they will be giving voting rights or franchise to the women. Another very important takeaway from this act is the ministers were responsible to legislature but not the executive councillors. So finally, Government of India Act 1935. The provisions of the Government of India Act 1935 were the results of discussions in the 3 Roundtable Conference, recommendations of the Simon Committee, reports of the Joint Select Committee, and also the White Papers. It also included the recommendations of the Secretary of the State Samuel Hoare. So coming to the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935, very first one. This act proposed the creation of the All India Federation. And this All India Federation would be comprising of the British ruled provinces and so as the Indian princely states. But there was a condition in the creation of the All India Federation. The condition was half of the princely state must give their consent to join the federation, and the secondary condition was that in the joining princely states, their aggregate population must be more than 50% of the total population of the princely states. As none of these criteria were fulfilled, the All India Federation never became operational. Moving on to the next important provision. This particular act, it removed the diarchy from the provinces and it initiated diarchy in the center. Looking at the provinces, diarchy was removed and provincial autonomy was sought to be provided. Apart from it, bicameral legislation was introduced in the 6 of the provinces out of the 11 provinces of the British India. So these 6 provinces where the bicameral legislation or 2-house legislation or 2-house provision was introduced. These includes UP, Bihar, Odisha, Bombay, Madras and Bengal. These places bicameral legislation was introduced. Moving on to the next important provision of this act, that is the diarchy at the center. So similar to the diarchy at the provinces which was there in the 1909, now at the center, 2 authorities were created, Governor General with his Executive Council and Governor General with the popular ministers. So Governor General with the Executive Council were managing reserved subjects and Governor General with the popular ministers, they were managing the transferred subjects. It also created the 3 lists of the legislation, that is provincial, federal and concurrent list of legislation. Another thing that many of the institutions of the Government of India trace their origin to this particular act. So for example, this particular act led to the establishment of the Federal Court of India, which is right now Supreme Court of India, then Federal Public Service Commission of India, which is right now Union Public Service Commission of India, and so as the Provincial Public Service Commissions, that is right now State Public Service Commissions. It also led to the establishment of the Federal Bank of India, which is right now known as Reserve Bank of India. Next important provision, this act enfranchised approximately 10 to 14% of the population of India. This act also called for the establishment of the Federal Railways in India, and that's how railways came under the central government authority. Another very important provision of this act is that there are some practices which existed in the Rajasthan. I hope all of you must have heard about the Johar. What is Johar? Johar is basically when the dignity of the women is on the stake, her honor, her respect is on the stake. So she has taken permission from the husband that in this situation she can take her life by jumping in the burning log of the woods. So many such instances of the Johar you must have heard from Rajasthan and many Rajput kingdoms. But apart from the Johar, there is another tradition which existed in the Rajput kingdoms of the Rajasthan and so as the many other areas of India, particularly the northwest and the central India. So what is this? This is called a Sak ritual. So there are many ways of doing the Sak ritual. First of all, when the women have committed Johar to safeguard their dignity, honor and pride, men also commit Sak ritual whereby in the morning they will be taking the bath and then they will also be advancing towards that particular burning log of the wood and they will be sacrificing their life. In another situation, to safeguard their dignity, if they are surrounded by the enemies, so the soldiers would be taking each other's life to safeguard their dignity. This is also the Sak ritual. And one of the best example of the Sak ritual is the Raja Hambir Dev of Ranthambore Fort. When Alauddin Khilji entered into the Ranthambore Fort and then Raja Hambir Dev realized that he cannot win against the Alauddin Khilji. So what he did, that he went atop his Shiv temple and there he cut his head with his own hand. That was also the Sak ritual. So it's not just the women who commit Johar, but also the men also committed this kind of brave act to safeguard their dignity. Another question which was there in the last year paper, which actually led to confusion among the people, that what has been asked, and it was actually a name of the coin which was asked in the last year paper, that is Phanam. So there were many such coins in the medieval India. Just remember the name, that is Jittal, Tanka, Adha, Bikh, Bahloli, Hastagani, Dukani, Sultani, Muhammadi, Varaha, Jalali, Muhar, Asarfi, etc.
History is often intrigued with the mystery. But these mysteries, once you embark on that path, it gives you the glimpse into the past life of the people. And when we embark on the past life of the people to know about them, we get to know that how their governmental system, their technology, and their way to communicate and their civilizational values developed. So in a way, it tells us that how the human beings come together and how they build the greater things in their life. One of the very important part in the Indian history is the Indus Valley civilization. Though many of the things related to Indus Valley civilization still to be deciphered, but there are the things that we know. There are the discoveries which has happened, and it gives us a deeper dive into the practices of Indus Valley. So what we are talking about, seals. They are one of the most important source of information about Indus Valley civilization. When we talk about the seals, they are one of the most important artifact, and till this date, more than 4,000 seals have been found from Indus Valley. These seals of Indus Valley, they are generally in any geometric shape like square or oblong. There are other shapes also, but these two are very common. And the general size of the Indus Valley seals is 2 into 2 square inches. Moving on further, seals are pictographic in nature and they do depict many animals. For example, there is depiction of tiger, there is depiction of elephant, rhinoceros, there is depiction of deer, there is depiction of ibex, there is depiction of bison. So many animals are depicted. Apart from it, Mother Goddess and Pasupati seal and unicorn seal. They are the most famous seals. So let's talk about not just the usual ones that you might be knowing, some of the interesting seals of the Indus Valley. So let's start with the very first one, ibex seal. Ibex seal is basically related to the wild goat variety which was there in the northwestern part of Indian subcontinent. These goats do have very wild long horns and they are scary sometimes. So depiction of this animal may be indicative of the nature worship and maybe the depiction of the wildlife diversity of that area. Similarly, the seals of rhinoceros in a separate cases have also been identified. Then large number of the seals are related to bison also. Bison seals are quite a plenty in number. We can say that just after unicorn seal, bisons are also in good chunk. Then let's talk about one of the very interesting seal of the Indus Valley. In this seal, what's been depicted is in the middle, there is a female deity and on the sides there are two tigers and she is fighting off with the two tigers. This is one of the very unique seal which has been found from IVC. Apart from it, the ibex seal which I was talking about, that's not been found from everywhere, but there is a place called Cholistan in Pakistan where it has been found. Then coming to another seal, that in one of the seal, as you see that in the modern practices of Hinduism, the goddess and the gods are depicted with the animals. So one of the finding can suggest that kind of practice also existed in IVC. For example, the same female deity or female goddess has been depicted riding on an elephant, and this has been a very recent discovery of IVC. Apart from it, Pasupati seal is one of the very famous seal of Indus Valley civilization, which is depiction of a person in a yogic posture, indicative of that meditative processes were known to the people. And moreover, sometimes historians equate the Pasupati seal with Adi Shiva. Moreover, depiction of the animals also can be equated with the worship of Pushan. Pushan is a god who is mentioned in the Vedic literature as the god of the animals. Then unicorn seal, which has the maximum number, and it has been found from almost all the towns of the Indus Valley civilization. So unicorn seal is a depiction of one-horned animal which in reality does not very much resembles to any animal, but its abundance suggests that it must have been at that point of time, and people gave very high value to this particular animal. Then Mother Goddess, one of the very famous seal of the Indus Valley civilization. Though the Mother Goddess separate images were also there, but in seals also she has been depicted in number of the time. Sometimes she is depicted with the two legs apart, and then a birth event has been depicted. Sometimes she is depicted as a pregnant lady. Sometimes she is depicted with adorned with so many ornaments. So Mother Goddess, a symbol of the sexuality, she is the symbol of the fertility also. So counting these all seals, there was huge variety in Indus Valley civilization, and as you can see in the images in the background, you can get greater insights about the seals of Indus Valley. Moreover, last but not the least, the seals of the Indus Valley civilization were made from many materials, though statite was the main material, but apart from statite, they have used fanes, agate and copper was also used. So these materials are also used for making it. Apart from it, terracotta seals were also created. In fact, there has been instances of the seals made from gold and ivory also, but not silver. So make a note of it, not silver. Gold and ivory has been found. Then another thing, very important thing about the seals of Indus Valley, that they were covered with the glossy glass-like material. And that's exactly similar to that what we see in today's time in the cutleries. The cutleries that you use in the houses, bone china, fine bone china material, and it has a glossy appearance. So same glossy appearance you can see on the seals also. So though it's been time, Indus Valley civilization which existed between 2600 to 1800 to be precise, and it's almost more than 4500 years back. But the know-how of the people was very high, as you can see from the seals. And last but not the least information. Till this date, more than 400 symbols have been found from the Indus Valley seals, and apart from it, more than 20 animals, different type of 20 animals are depicted on Indus Valley seal.
So with this, we are ending this episode of the Culture Quantum, and the team Culture Quantum has tried to bring important topics from the ancient, medieval, art and culture and modern Indian history. I hope it will help you, and in this last week, I would just request to you, revise, revise and revise. In this last week, don't panic, be cool, calm and composed, and have faith in the God. Team Culture Quantum wishes you all the best and perform well in the exam. Thank you for watching Culture Quantum, and please do not forget to share, subscribe, like, comment and recommend the channel Culture Quantum. Thank you.